pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. There is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Goes, 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 goes,
Now, from sunny South Florida, it's the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscalla. Every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to midnight on the L&M Network. And now, your host, Riscalla.
All right. Hello. Test one. Test. All right. Hopefully we can get this thing to work. Testing. Test.
These are bad people. You know, a lot of people say deep state. I don't say deep state. We have a lot of bad people, and I think they're being found out. I think right now, I saw where Comey is blaming this one, and Brennan's blaming another one, and they're going against each other. And Clapper, I think yesterday, maybe is blaming President Obama. Oh, so surprised to see that happening. Got a lot of bad people. You got a lot of bad people, and it's a shame.
Anti-vaccination groups are being targeted for spreading dangerous propaganda.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exist for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. For those who control the levers of power in Washington and for the global special interests, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind. Our campaign represents a true existential threat like they haven't seen before. This is not simply another 4-year election. This is a crossroads in the history.
All right. Hopefully, oh my gosh. It's amazing how I will test the equipment before we go live. Everything works fine, and then we go live, and I've got this huge hum, this buzz that was just knocking me out. I couldn't figure out what was going on, where it was coming from. And I finally figured out it was one of the plugs were shorting and causing a hum. So I apologize for the intro this evening. It is the Red Pill Reality Show. I am your host, Riscalla, with a little bit of technical difficulties, which I believe I've now been overcome. And we're going to have another fantastic show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about the 14th Amendment, the subject around the 14th Amendment. What was the importance of the 14th Amendment? I'm going to ask you guys out there, I know there's a lot of you listening. We're asking for your input tonight. We're asking you to call in. We're going to keep the call-in lines open, and we're asking you to call in. And I will announce the lines many times tonight. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your input. I want to hear your comments, your questions. This is something that happened a long time ago, and what we're asking to do is find restoration, to restore something that was deceivingly taken away. and to get back what is rightfully ours. I don't think that's asking too much. But I may be prejudiced. Who knows? That's why I want to hear from you guys. That's why I want you guys to call in. Let's hear your comments. Let's hear your questions. And we'll do that. We'll do that around 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, somewhere in there. I will bring the guests on at around 9:30. We'll have David Callihan, and we'll have Milo Townsend as well. And both of them have spent hundreds of hours, maybe even thousands of hours, involved in what we're going to be talking about tonight. Both of them well qualified with regard to experience and knowledge to be discussing what we're discussing tonight. I found out about this, I guess about 8 weeks ago now, a couple of months ago, and it was like a proverbial slap to the face, because anybody who has listened to the show has heard me say repeatedly, we don't have a government that is by the people and for the people, and certainly doesn't represent the people. We have people who are just out there to glorify themselves and enrich themselves in whatever way they can, and the entire time figuring out ways to literally steal from us, whether that is a God-given right or whether it is literally our financial assets. They find ways to take that from us, and they call them laws or taxes, or they apply these fancy names to them and have us believe that it's patriotic to abide by these things that they have set up that benefit them, but really don't benefit us. You look at these people who serve in Congress or the people that serve in Senate. These people are paid handsomely for what they are and what they do. And yet, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the Congress was only there 1/3 of the time in 2017, I think was the year, 27, maybe it's 2018. One of those years was only there 1/3 of the time. How would you like to be able to go to work? And if you're a typical person that works like 5 days a week, most people work more than that, but if you're a 5-day-a-week person and you only go to work for, say, Monday through Wednesday and say, well, I've had it for this week. I think I'll be back next week. See you, bye. You think your boss would put up with that? Because we've certainly put up with it. We've allowed them to do that. We've allowed them to continue in a way where they continuously benefit from everything that they do up there. And many times it is to our detriment. It is at our cost. It is of the sweat of our labor, which is actually the very definition of slavery. When you can have somebody who works from you and you take from them that which they have earned, that is slavery. And that's what they do to us. They call it taxes, but that's what it is. Taxes are just another form of thievery. It's just another way to get money out of you. And they classify it in such a way where it is something that you should be proud to do. And we find out that many of these people who pass all these laws pay little to no taxes whatsoever, because they are the ones who are very familiar with all the loopholes and how to get around it all. So when it's all said and done, we do not have a government that was intended by the founding fathers of this country. The America that we have grown up in, the America that we are living under today, is not the America that was intended for us. And the America that was intended for us was stolen in the late 1800s, depending upon which state it. I don't think they were called states at the time. I think they were called something else. But depending upon what state it was, some of them were literally overthrown. Militarily overthrown. Does that sound like America to you? And they were basically told either you're going to go along with what we've got or you're not going to go, period. So all of this happened quite some time ago, and as a result of that, I believe we are seeing what we see today, a government that is actually a government today that is in a political civil war today. We haven't gotten to the violent part of it, but we are certainly in a political civil war today. The original intention of the way this was supposed to work would be more balance. We would have more balance between the states and the federal portion. That, in my opinion, is supposed to be like the administrators. They're supposed to be able to control what's going on for all of the unions together and be able to be the spokesman for them. But they've kind of gone off on their own, done their own thing, and the result is a very dangerous government that we have today. A government that has people within it that would literally kill other people if they felt threatened that the truth would come out. That's what we're living under today. And what we have seen in this last, 8 weeks, I guess it's been, and what we've talked about is a way to circumvent that, a legal way to circumvent that. A way that all we're asking for is to go back to something that was already in place, and yet it had been taken out of place, and the power had been usurped, and as a result of that, the authority of the states, what's the word I'm looking for? The sovereignty of the states was stolen from them, and instead given to the federal portion of our government. And I always thought that I was a citizen of the United States. I didn't think it was important to be a citizen of the state of Florida, which is where I live. But the way I believe it was supposed to be is that you're a citizen of the state first, and because you are a citizen of the state, therefore you are an adopted citizen into the citizenry of the United States. But there's a reason why we want to be a citizen of the state versus a citizen of the United States. And we'll get into that in a little while. Again, we're going to ask for your calls. I'm going to ask for your comments. I'll be taking calls later on tonight. 561-440-5174. 561-440-5174. We'd like to hear from you, your input, your comments about what we're talking about. Do you think this is worth talking about? Are we wasting our time here in discussing what we're talking about? Because there are people who have invested a great deal into getting their states reestablished. And when I say invested, they have, some of them, literally their lives invested into this. This is how strongly they believe in this movement. So again, we'll be opening it up, and you guys can call in. You can give me a comment. You can give me a question. And hopefully we won't have any more problems with my board. It truly does amaze me. It really does amaze me. I do a dry run, make sure everything's okay, and then we go live, and son of a gun, here we go. Everything starts going wacko on me. Anyway, all right, so let's let me get a little further down the road here. In about 15 or 20 minutes, we'll have David and we'll have Milo on, and we'll be discussing the 14th Amendment, subjects around the 14th Amendment, the overthrow of the nation in 1861, I think was the number. And you can get more information about what we're talking about tonight at americasremedy.com. Now, I'm not affiliated with them. I don't make any kind of a discount or commission for telling you about them. What I make is the knowledge of knowing that I'm sending you to a place where I got a couple of DVDs that were given to me that were purchased there, and they are jam-packed full of information. I mean, just jam-packed full of information. I've watched them twice, and I'm going on my third time. It's because it's stuff that we talk about that we don't talk about every day. When we get into these discussions about all these things that went on so many years ago, it's not something that you talk about all day, and it's not something that that you have knowledge of right off the bat. And when for example, we have John Ainsworth on these DVDs, he is explaining what's going on, and some of it gets quite intricate. Some of it becomes quite involved. And so for me, it's so much so quick, I got to go back and watch it again. And maybe because of my age, I forget stuff pretty quickly now, you know. It has its upside. You can watch a movie that you hadn't watched in a while, and it's like the first time all over again. You walk into the room and try to remember what you walked into the room for, that kind of thing. a lot of times it works in your benefits, and sometimes it's, not so good. Went to the store the other day, parked my car, and I remembered when I was walking in the store, remember you put your car here, because I didn't park in a normal area because there wasn't any available spaces in the normal area that I parked. Stuck my car there, we went to the store, got my stuff, come walking out, and went to the normal area where I usually park, looking around for my car, and thinking to myself, now, doggone it, I remember I put my car, it's over on the other side of the parking lot, you big dummy. So sometimes it's good to remember, sometimes it's good not to remember, it's one of those things. Like I said, when you watch a movie you haven't seen in a while, hey, it's almost like it's watching it all over again. All right, I'm going to take a break, because I've got to do something in the background here while I'm on the break. See if I can get this right. And we'll be back in just a minute. Don't go away. You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. Tonight we're going to have David Callihan, Milo Townsend. We're going to be talking about a subject revolving around the 14th Amendment, the reestablishment. What is a reestablishment? What value is there in a reestablishment? Why would we want to do something like that? That kind of thing. And for me, it has been an eye-opening experience. It has truly been something that was a shock to me. I had no idea that this kind of thing even existed. But it's all documented. It's all, it's not theory. It's all there in black and white. It's documented by our government that basically an illegal takeover occurred, and it was done in a very deceptive way. And anybody who gets into a contract of any kind under a deceptive manner, if one of the parties is purposely deceiving the other, that contract is null and void. And that's basically where I'm coming from. That's my position. And those of you who watch the show, forgive me, those of you who listen to the show know that I'm a strong advocate of the Second Amendment. And it wasn't about hunting. And it certainly wasn't for us to be limited in any way, shape, or form with the ability to defend ourselves. And so I am, let me find it if I can find it. I'm going to play a little bit about how I feel about carrying a gun.
There are facts we're not being told on TV, so I want to talk to you about gun control in America. Why did all of the big media focus their attention on the attacks in Orlando and completely ignore the fact that the following weekend 52 people were shot in Chicago, a city with some of the strictest gun control laws in the country? There seems to be an agenda for gun control while ignoring the gun violence in other cities and countries where the experiment of gun control is already underway and failing. I carry a gun because there are only two types of creatures on this planet, predators and prey. No one watches a cheetah chase down a gazelle and deny that the gazelle has the right to use its horns to protect itself. But there are people who would deny that same right of self-defense to other human beings. Such people seem to think that the way to stop the cheetah is to cut the horns off the gazelle. That somehow, if you make it easier for the predator will simply go away. It doesn't work that way. If you make it easier for the predator, you get more predators. I carry a gun because when predators know they're less likely to have an advantage, they're less likely to be a predator. The FBI found that when states allow concealed carry, murder rates are immediately reduced. And cities in America that pass a law requiring households to have a firearm see the number of home invasions drop dramatically. I carry a gun because the ratio a gun is used in a homicide is significantly less than when it's used in self-defense. Firearms are used up to 300 times more often to save innocent lives than to commit a murder, and guns prevent up to 2.5 million crimes in the U.S. every year, often without a single shot ever being fired. I carry a gun not because it's a weapon, but because it's a shield. 200,000 women every year use a gun to defend themselves against sexual abuse. I carry a gun because almost every mass shooting in the last 50 years took place in a gun-free zone. Law-abiding citizens are forced to give up their right to protect themselves, while every criminal breaks the law, including gun-free signs, when they decide to murder. I carry a gun because a gun-free zone makes it easier for predators to target their prey. Stricter gun laws make the problem worse, and making guns illegal wouldn't remove murder from our cities any more than making heroin illegal stop addicts from doing drugs. I carry a gun because the facts are nations with strict gun control laws have significantly higher murder rates than those that don't. I carry a gun because I know in the U.S. scissors and knives kill almost 5 times more people every year than rifles do, including the AR-15 and other so-called assault rifles. Calling to ban a tool will not resolve the problem. I carry a gun because criminals break the law with or without them. The 9/11 terrorists used box cutters in airplanes. Timothy McVeigh used bags of assault fertilizer. I understand that some people want to blame things like semi-automatic rifles, 30-round magazines, hate crimes, terror threats, gun control, historic flags, national security, religion, or illegal immigration. I understand we want to blame something, anything that we can control. But don't blame me because I carry a concealed gun to protect my family. I understand we need to start addressing what we really want to ban: violence, murder, and insanity. I carry a gun because I know who's pushing to ban them. Our right to bear arms is not there simply to protect us against lowly criminals. I know the politicians know this, which is why they call for gun control instead of crime control. I carry a gun because I've seen gamblers who want more winnings, alcoholics who want more alcohol, and people with power want more power. I understand what the Founding Fathers knew, that the right to bear arms is there to protect the American people from those drunk with power, and I understand every country was free before it wasn't. I carry a gun because having the right to bear arms gives the citizens of this great nation a fighting chance against the predators of greed and power, whether in our home, our capital, or our neighboring lands. Evil exists only because too many good people stand by and do nothing. I know seeing America's right to free speech was a chilling wake-up call when it became locked away in a zone. That's why so many steadfast Americans and great organizations stand up for the people to keep the balance of power from tipping over. I carry a gun because it removes the unfair advantage between predators and prey. I don't carry because I'm looking for a fight. I carry a gun because I'm looking to be left alone. People can only persuade you to do something by one of two ways: reason or force. Having a gun with me removes their option to make me do something by force. It helps keep predators civilized. That's why the right to bear arms is important. That's why I own a firearm, and that's why I'm proud to say I carry a gun.
You now.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes. I didn't have time to
You have to give us your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Mark Robinson. I live That's right here in Greensboro. I've lived in Greensboro all my life. I didn't have time to write a fancy speech. I didn't have time to, I didn't have the resource of an English teacher to sit down and write a speech with at school today and be, brought over here, practice or anything. What I really came down here for is this. I've heard a whole lot of people in here talking tonight about this group and that group, and domestic violence and blacks, these minorities and that minority. What I want to know is, when are you all going to start standing up for the majority? And here's who the majority is. I'm the majority. I'm a law-abiding citizen who's never shot anybody, never committed a serious crime, never committed a felony. I've never done anything like that. But it seems like every time we have one of these shootings, nobody wants to put the blame where it goes, which is at the shooter's feet. You want to put it at my feet. You want to turn around and restrict my right, constitutional right that's spelled out in black and white. You want to restrict my right to buy a firearm and protect myself from some of the very people you're talking about in here tonight. It's ridiculous. I don't think Rod Serling could come up with a better script. It does not make any sense. The law-abiding citizens of this community and many communities around this country, we're the first ones taxed and the last ones considered and the first ones punished when things like this happens, because our rights are the ones that are being taken away. That's the reason why I came down here today. Gun show or no gun show, NRA or no NRA. I'm here to stand up for the law-abiding citizens of this community, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You can take the guns away from us all you want to. You all write a law, I follow the law, I'll bring my guns down here, I'll turn them in. But here's what's going to happen. The Crips and the Bloods on the other side of town, they're not going to turn their guns in. They're going to hold on to them. And what's going to happen when you have to send the police down there to go take them? The police can barely enforce the law as it is. As what I see, we demonize the police, criminalize and vilify the police, and we make the criminals into victims. And we're talking about restricting guns? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that when the police department's already hamstrung? You're not going to be able to go down here and take these guns from these criminals. So the criminals are going to hold on to their guns. They're still going to have them. They're still going to break in my house, and they're still going to shoot me with them. And guess who's going to be the one that suffers? It's going to be me. Well, I'm here to tell you tonight, It is not going to happen without a fight. And when I say fight, I don't mean shots fired. I don't mean fist thrown. I mean I'm going to come down here to this city council and raise hell just like these loonies from the left do until you listen to the majority of the people in this city. And I am the majority. The majority of the people in this city are law-abiding, and they follow the law, and they want their constitutional right to be able to bear arms. They want to be able to go to the gun show and buy a hunting rifle or a sport rifle. There are no military-grade weapons sold at the gun show. An AR-15 is not a military-grade weapon. Anybody that would go into combat with an AR-15 is a fool. It's a semi-automatic .22 rifle. You'd be killed in 15 minutes in combat with that thing. So we need to dispel all these myths, and we need to drop all this division that we got going on here. Because the bottom line is, when that Second Amendment was written, whether the framers liked it or not, they wrote it for everybody. And I am everybody. And the law-abiding citizens of this city are everybody. And we want our rights, and we want to keep our rights. And by God, we're going to keep them, come hell or high water.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show on the LNM Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Do you need toner for your Epson, Hewlett-Packard, Canon, Brother, Apple, or Sharp printers? Look no further than Laser Technologies. In business for over 20 years, they offer the lowest prices on toner on the web. They can also repair your laser printers and toners fast and easy. Call their expert staff today at 561-792-9600 or email us at service@laser-technologies.com for all your toner needs. All toner is shipped nationwide. Why wait? Get the lowest prices on toner. Call or email us today.
Grace has some pretty stellar arms, like Serena Williams good, but her face is pretty disgusting.
Someone please tell him to go back into his closet and leave us alone.
Britney's face is so stupid and I hate her so much. It's like a scientist created her in a lab to annoy humanity and didn't even do that good of a job.
Megan reminds me of a troll doll that came to life intent on killing us with her stupidity.
Why is Grace's head so big? It definitely has nothing to do with how smart she is and probably everything to do with how bloated she is.
He's so funny. Just kidding. Who would find this disfigured flamingo funny?
Never post a selfie of yourself. You look so ugly.
The only reason you have so many views is because we think you're a freak and we can't look away.
Megan is the main reason that the world sucks so much.
I would rather get cancer than listen to another Trevor Moran song.
You are a mistake. You should have never been born.
Drown yourself in a shallow puddle, please.
Wow, I hope she's sterile.
These really stopped being funny a long time ago.
You're so much more than the things that people say about you.
Those people have no right to say cruel things to you to make themselves feel better.
It's okay that you sound different than everyone else.
That's what makes you so special.
We will not tolerate it.
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 Every day, people make me feel like I stand out simply because of the way that I look.
Every day, people make me feel small.
Every day, I face the cruel words of bullying.
And every day, people tell me that I'm brave for enduring this humiliation.
But we're not the brave ones.
It's the ones that say no to the bullying.
The witnesses.
If we all join together, there's nothing that we can't do. We will no longer be the silent majority.
When we see bullying online,
We will let the world know that we're going to take action with the eye.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
Our actions will overpower cruel words.
I am a witness.
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 There is power in words.
But it's nothing compared to the power of the actions that we put behind our words.
Visit eyewitnessbullying.org to learn more.
I am a witness, and so are you.
I'm gonna stand by you.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
We have ignition. Strap in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscalla, every Saturday night on the LNM Network from 9 p.m. to midnight. And now your host, Riscalla.
All right, we are back. It is the Red Pill Reality Show. I am your host, Riscalla. A little bit of technical difficulty getting started tonight. I don't know how that happened. I run a dry run before we do the live stuff and make sure everything is okay. The volumes are set and so forth, and everything was fine. I went live and had this god-awful buzz. My goodness, I don't know if it came across the air or not. I'll find out when I listen to the recording. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Greatly appreciate you doing that. It is an honor and privilege, truly mean that, to have you here and allow us to share with you some of this information that we have. And in my point of view, my humble opinion, this information is vital. If you are someone who is in search of truth, and you want to know what really happened, this information is for you. Again, I'm not affiliated with them, but I'm happy to endorse them, americasremedy.com. Go there. You can find a wide variety of information there with regard to what we're going to be talking about tonight. So let me welcome David Callihan. If it hadn't been for meeting up with David, I would not have known about any of this. So David, thank you for doing your part. Are you there, Dave?
You're welcome, Riscalla.
There he is. I knew he's there. And one of the other people who have given us a tremendous amount of information and actually kind of lived what we're talking about is Milo. Milo, thank you for joining in and giving us the information and sharing with us. Appreciate it.
Well, hi. Good evening, Riscalla. Thank you.
All right, guys. So, we've been talking about this for a while now, and I think that David brings up a good point, and the point being relevance. What relevance is there? How relevant is this to those who are listening? I had asked earlier that we would be discussing this tonight. I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear your comments, your questions. I want you to call in. I gave the number out. It's 561-440-5174. Call in, give me a comment, give me a question. I'd like to kind of feel how other people think about the fact that our nation was overthrown a long time ago, and that we're literally living under a, I don't know, I think it would be proper to say an illegal in technical terms, and it's not a government that was originally set up to run this way. We were not originally set up to run this way. And yet here's what we have today. And much of that is through deception. So if you're somebody who doesn't like to be deceived, I particularly don't care for that, and you find that someone has deceived you, I think it's only proper to ask them to rectify whatever that deception was. In this particular example, it's a restoration of our states, because the states have lost their ability to be in balance because of all of this. So anyway, how is it important to an individual? How do we make it important to a listener that what we're talking about, maybe important isn't the right word. How do we, relevant, I guess is the more accurate word. How do we make it a part of something in their thinking process that what we're talking about should be of concern to anybody? Why was it a concern to you, Milo?
Well, you can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I got a little bit of feedback, like echo, but it's okay. To answer your question, really when I started looking at this, I was looking for answers already. I don't want to get into a whole long diatribe about how I wound up here, but just very briefly, I'll try to summarize. I actually had been in some legal trouble. I was in trouble with the DMV, and I won't get into all the details, but basically the DMV was telling me that I owed them a great deal of money, and it wasn't huge sums like thousands of dollars, but for me at the time, under my financial circumstances, it was quite a bit of money, and it was for something that had done no harm to anyone, and had done, literally, well, what had happened was I had an 8-day insurance lapse. I had not driven in that 8 days. My car hadn't even been on the road, but I didn't turn my tag in before I had the lapse in insurance. And so the DMV sent me a series of letters telling me that I owed them money. Unfortunately, I'd spent all the money that I had on getting my insurance reinstated. So no harm had been done to anybody, no damage to anyone's property. Under common law, under basically there was no injury whatsoever.
No harm, no
So
foul.
I felt like, I'm sorry?
No harm, no foul.
Well, you would think so, but I felt like I was being robbed by the state.
Yeah,
and
you are.
So I started looking for answers, and this put me on a road that took me all kinds of different directions. I mean, I was looking into what we have since come to denounce as sovereign citizenship. I was looking into right to travel. I was looking at all of this and weighing options, because ultimately in my gut I felt like what had occurred, and there was more to the DMV story, but I won't share it all now, but what had occurred was an injustice. And you grow up in America, and you're a child, you go to school, you say the Pledge of Allegiance, you're taught all these things about this is the land of the free and the home of the brave, and you say, you've got liberty and justice for all, right? That's the ideal. Well, as I became an adult and then encountered one problem after another, and then this was really the straw that broke the camel's back, it began to disillusion me. And so I was already looking for answers, and I was off on a whole bunch of different tangents, but a friend of mine who had run for an office at one point in time, a county level office, he was about my age, and we were decent friends. We were really close friends in terms of we had common ideals and values. We've both been Liberty candidates and delegates for the Ron Paul convention and all that, back in, this was about 2011 or 12. So he sent me a message and put me on to something that he had come across. And it turns out when I went to look at it, it was the NC Republic website. So I went and checked this out. I read all the information that was available on the page, and I don't remember how, but somehow I got in contact with John Ainsworth. And of course, you've had John on before, and now John and I are really close friends as well. And, John is the founder of America's Remedy. He was instrumental in discovering the legal and historical basis for our entire argument, our entire position. So I had numerous conversations with John, and ultimately, after a period of probably 6 months or more, I eventually decided that January 2013 was the month that I signed my citizenship affidavit and actually became a citizen of the reestablished state of North Carolina. And it didn't get me out of my legal issues. It was helpful in some ways, but mostly when I got into it, I was looking for answers, like a lot of people are. I was looking for what John calls a silver bullet answer. And John was a lot of help. All of the citizens of the Republic were a lot of help. And we did get through a whole series of court cases that ensued after that. And that's a story for another time. But the point being, ultimately, that originally I wasn't looking for any long-term solution. I was looking for something for me. I was looking for something to help me in the situation that I was in. I knew deep down that something was deeply wrong. Something was amiss. There was a dysfunction in America, in our society, in our political and legal culture, and I had to find the answers to why. And I really do believe that America's Remedy has, at least as far as my knowledge goes, the best explanation of why that is, how that occurred, and how to fix it. And so it started out with selfish motives, I have to admit. But in the end, I came to realize over the years that I've been involved with them that this has to be bigger than ourselves. We have to recognize the magnitude of this and be willing to look beyond just ourselves, our individual immediate circumstances. We've got to look down the road and see that the blessings of liberty that were preserved supposedly to the posterity of the founders, which is us, by the way, those blessings of liberty that they intended to preserve to us and pass on to us are something that we have to assert them. We have to demand them. We have to take them. We can't ask people to give them to us because life doesn't work that way. The world doesn't work that way. Power, the people that exercise power, especially people who exercise it on the basis of a criminal or deceitful or coercive basis, those people aren't just going to give you back your rights. And really one of the beauties of this entire argument is that it gives us the means by which to take back control of our own destiny, to take back control of what is rightfully ours. We don't have to ask for it. We don't have to vote someone into office for it, but it's a long-term solution. It's not something that's going to happen, in a day or two. So really, I don't know. I've gone way beyond answering your question. So I'll just stop there right now.
In some ways, it's similar to what I was going through. I had this burning desire many, many years ago that was inside of me that I knew things weren't right. Things were just not right. God, please, I'm asking you, show me what is wrong. Why do I feel this way? That went on, oh my gosh, it went on for quite some time. February 2002 is when I ran across a document that was on a government site. It was the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and now I'm a Vietnam War veteran. That document basically said that the entire preface to the war was based upon a false flag event. That this particular attack upon the ship, I can't remember the name of the ship now, that was the excuse for us to go to war. And that just snowballed. From that point forward, I said, I was sick to my stomach. I really thought I was having a nervous breakdown for a period there because I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. If so many of my friends had gone off to war and didn't come back, and those who came back weren't my friends any longer. They were somebody else from what they witnessed and what they saw. all of that was on them because they needed an excuse to go to war. That just didn't sit correct with my mind. It didn't make sense to me. How could people be so utterly, disgustingly evil? And what I found out was that is in fact what happened. They made up an excuse, and then as I watched after 9/11, we went and attacked. We started in Afghanistan, and I thought to myself, well, Afghanistan what did they have to do with it? Well, they supposedly the guys that held Osama bin Laden there. Okay, well, I find out that the government there, the Taliban, said, if you'll show us some evidence, we'll go get him for you. And we don't need any evidence. We want him. We're going to come get him. So they forced themselves basically into Afghanistan, and then out of nowhere they decided to attack Iraq. Iraq had no physical threat and played no part whatsoever in 9/11, yet they somehow determined that they needed to attack Iraq. And this is where we've been for year after year after year after year. This is not the kind of America that was supposed to be the intent of the Founding Fathers. This is not a representation of what these original people who basically sacrificed their entire lives sometimes wanted for us in the future. What they wanted for us was a far more balanced system where we have far more control. That's what it was about, where the people have far more control. So for me, similar thing, Milo, is a burning inside of me. I had to know more, and I had to know more, and from there it just kept going. Let me ask David. For you, David, what do you think was the thing that caused you to go searching for what the truth is?
Well, my story goes back to the Clinton administration and a decision that was made to close a few military bases in the country, one of which was Griffiths Air Force Base in upstate New York, and I lived rather close to it, and had acquired a piece of property that I have 5 children, and they're very close in age, only 6 years difference between my 5 kids, and we lived on this little hobby farm about 20 miles from the base in Utica, New York, and actually the town of Frankfurt. And the president and Congress made a decision to close that base, and it completely upended the economy of that part of the world. And I, being a sales rep for a pretty big company, my territory was pretty much upstate New York and New England, but all of a sudden, and there were other things, but generally speaking, that closure completely upended my business, my ability to sell the products that I was trying to sell, and that and some other things that were going on made me concerned that jeepers, this government has the ability to completely upend people's lives and on the personal level destroy your ability to even survive. Something just doesn't seem right. And so I began to dig in and study and got back in that day. We didn't have what we have now. You didn't have cell phones, and you didn't have email, or well, actually email is there a bit, but the point was that we didn't have it the way we have it now. And so I got on forums. Forums was a way that you kind of got connected to people, and would get on to telephone calls with people and so on, and began to realize that there was a whole lot of stuff that wasn't that the way that we thought it was isn't the way it really is. And that was 1997, 1998 time frame. Now we're 21 years later, and so there's a lot of information that I've learned over that period of time. But that was the the seed that began to be planted, and there's a whole lot of stuff that we could go and talk about. In fact, one of the things that I think is relevant here is the story of Viktor Frankl, who was a psychologist who wrote a book called The Meaning of Man, I think it's called, back around right after the Second World War. And Frankl was a Holocaust victim. He was a Jew and was in Auschwitz. And he survived Auschwitz, and he wrote this book. And one of the things he says in this book that I think is germane and relevant to what we're talking about tonight is that when you can figure out the why, you'll figure out the how. And I think that part of what we're discussing here about all three of our stories is that we began to question why are things the way they are, and why does it seem that we don't have the freedoms that we used to have. Riscalla, you and I, even more than Milo, because he's still in his 30s, we're in our 60s. We can remember our growing up
completely
years.
different. Yeah.
It was a completely different world than we have today. Freedom to do what you wanted to do, and not being afraid of strangers like we are today, and the ability of parents. I mean, I never, most of my growing up years, we just say, Bob, Mom, and Dad were going out, and we went and played all day long,
right.
and never, we didn't have to get back in touch with our parents or anything, and there just wasn't that sense of emergency and fear that there is today. People literally left their houses unlocked and their cars unlocked, and it was just considered to be normal. You had windows open, and you just knew that you could. And I lived in a little rinky-dink little town, didn't even have a policeman in it at all. And it's like you just don't think in those kinds of terms anymore. And we're now a police state-based country. We are. There's no question. So the question that we need to ask is, why are we the way we are? And is it the way it ought to be? And if it is, then fine, we just live with it. But if it's not, what can we do to, how can we get things to where they ought to be? And that's, I think part of what we need to think about at this point. The three of us got together earlier this week, and we talked about where we wanted to go tonight. And, we came to a conclusion that we really need to know what those who've listened for the last 8 weeks to any of the shows, or maybe to the whole series of shows, thinks about what we're talking about. And by the way, Riscalla, you and I met about 9 weeks ago, or 10 weeks ago, when I had met Angel, and she told me about Michael's show on Friday night, and she was going to be a guest, so I went and listened, and during that show I called in and made a few comments. I talked about the fact that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And when are we going to stop being insane and do something different? And then we talked about the concept of Jorge Santayana when he said that they who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. He must have been talking about the bad past, because you're not condemned for repeating good past. And then out of that have concluded that they who can remember the good past are blessed to repeat it, but they who cannot remember the good past get what's coming to them. We talked about that night. And then, but the thing I want to mention about that is I hadn't even heard about America's Remedy or Ainsworth until about a week later. And when I began to look at it, so this is new to me as much as it is to you, but it's absolutely relevant information.
I agree.
My story is that I've spent 10 years or 11 years of my life studying a whole another picture, another part of the picture. And the stuff that John and Milo and the other folks in that movement have pulled together dovetails into other significant information that we've talked about some parts of, but not all of it, that really is a part of this answer too. And the question is, can we put together the dots? Can we connect the dots to give people that really care about where we are and have had similar stories as we have come together in a way that we can do something about the circumstances we find ourselves in at this time in our society? That to me is why I'm involved in all this.
So I think it would be fair to say that the commonality would be that we all agreed that there was something, we realized there was something more to what was going on than what was going on, that there was something just didn't add up. And that, I think, is the kind of people that are going to be the ones who make the difference, because they realize they haven't been succumbed by the system, if you will, the conditioning or the programming, whatever you want to call it. It actually exists, and it affects people's way of thinking, and all of that plays a part in this. And so if you're somebody who you just know something's not right, you can't put your finger on it, but you know something's not right, well, maybe you want to look into what we're talking about, because possibly what we're talking about can help fulfill the burning, that fire that goes on when you know something's, that gut feeling, something is just not right, and you don't know what to do about it. Part of that is knowledge, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. And I'm ever so grateful to these two gentlemen, and John Ainsworth, and I can't think of his name now, Paul Thompson. Paul Thompson, I'm sorry, for putting in their part of this, all in their contribution to this, because this, to me, is vital. This affects all of us, whether you like it or not. Now, if you're somebody who just sits on the sideline or you just say this is a waste of time, then you can turn us off. But if you're somebody who really believes in what we're saying, and all I'm saying is, if somebody has taken something from us, which I believe this is what has happened, but if somebody has taken something from me, and they've done it in a deceptive way, I see nothing wrong with saying, hey, look, you did this and you did this in a deceptive way, and to your detriment, it's all documented. I'm not making any of this up. It's all here in the documents. I want this back. I don't think that's asking too much. And especially if this thing that we're asking for back is something that literally affects our lives day in and day out. Something that would help bring in a positive change to our lives. Because, you've heard me say many times, we can bring in change. God knows we can bring in change. We've seen that in the last administration that was here. They brought in change. It's positive change that we need. It's the American idea. Milo kind of described it, and David kind of described it. The American idea of America is not what we see today. My gosh, and it's certainly not anything like when I was growing up. David, you said it's completely different. Imagine, I think I was probably, how old are you when you were in 6th grade? 10? 11? I was 12 years old. I was in 6th grade. Me and my friend hopped on a bus. I was living in Coral Gables, Florida. Hopped on a bus, went to the Coral Gables terminal, caught a bus to downtown Miami, spent the whole day downtown Miami, just kind of looking around these big buildings. It was kind of neat to look at, because Coral Gables at the time, we didn't know it, but Coral Gables had moratorium on buildings, so you couldn't have a building more than, I think, 2 floors or something like that. Anyway, so they had these big, tall buildings, and it was really neat. Spent the whole day out there, got back on the bus, came home when, it started to get dark, and didn't have a problem. No problem, not a worry in the world. Try to do that today. Those children would disappear in a heartbeat. So that's how greatly the change is.
Riscalla, here's one. When I was about 12, 13 years old, it was no big deal to go out on the street corner and put out your thumb and hitchhike into town.
Yeah.
We did it all the time. Imagine today, kids hitchhiking around, South Florida.
Yeah. I don't think that would...
I'd give my left thumb just to be able to ride in the back of a pickup truck without getting a ticket.
Yeah. So there's all of these things. I don't like these restrictions. That to me is not being free. I have to have permission from them to do this and permission from them to do that and do the other. In some ways I can
somewhat... The state is our nanny.
Yeah.
The state has become our nanny.
But that's not real freedom, Really, it's not if you think about it. And I think the one that really perturbs me the worst is the deceptive way that they collect income tax. That's the one that kind of really rubs me really bad, because many people think it's something that they have to do. It's not something that you have to do, but it's brought on in such a way that once you sign that piece of paper, you're now obligated to continue on with the contract. The contract is you're going to pay them for the sweat of your labor. Now, if you've earned money and that money earns money, that's a different story to me. But if you've earned money by the sweat of your brow, in other words, you've gone out and you've physically worked, whatever that might be, anything from office work to janitorial to custodial, whatever that might be, should not be taxable. That is your money. That should belong to you 100% of that. And if I'm not mistaken, it was like that to a certain time, 1913, I think it was. In America, it was, and we already had schools, we already had roads, we maintained all of that. We maintained all of that using money coming from other sources. And there was taxes, but there wasn't a tax on the sweat of your brow, so to speak. That is one of the worst for me. And it's all done in a deceptive manner.
I agree with you. Charging people, stealing a portion of their labor is what it is. Jefferson was against it. And I had a discussion with somebody, a little bit of a discussion earlier, about Social Security, because they were trying to tell me that it's mandatory, but it's not. It's not mandatory to participate in Social Security either.
Guys, if I might throw in it's a little bit of an aside, but I think it's relevant to what you guys are saying, or very germane. And by the way, this is an area that I've spent a lot of time. I've actually argued my own case before the tax court in 2011. And the point is that if we were to follow even the tax code the way that it's truly written, we would not be liable for a tax on our labor. It's that the government has now gotten into a position where they've even misinterpreted Supreme Court cases at the lower court levels in order to force people to pay a tax that they don't owe. That's how badly things have become. And here's where the real crux of that is. It comes down to this. What can an individual do about it? And the answer is, because of the way that control frauds have been laid out, where they've taken legitimate entities and turned them into weapons against society through color of law, pretense of authority, and doing illicit financial manipulation and coercion, they've literally put us in a box where we no longer have the ability to achieve remedy. And that's why we're having these conversations, because the whole thing has been flipped on its head. And
may I qualify
the whole point? Go ahead.
Something?
Sure, go ahead, Milo.
I just want to qualify that statement, because I know that you're aware of this, but just the way that you said it, there is a way to achieve remedy. It's just that you can't do it within that system.
Oh, great. Yeah, but that's what I meant, is in that system you can't achieve remedy. That's what I meant, yeah.
Right.
Thank you for correcting. My dad used to say, hear what I mean, not what I say. So,
right, exactly. Exactly. Well, I agree, though. We need to get some feedback. We need to know what people feel about this, what people think about it, how do they receive it. I'm really interested to hear other people's perspectives. We can sit here and the three of us talk in this echo chamber every night from now till kingdom come, but it won't change anything. So I really hope we'll get some callers to give us some feedback on this.
So the calling line is 561-440-5174. 561-440-5174. Opening up, the lines are open. You can give us a call, give us a comment, give us a question. We'd like to get some feedback. This discussion is going into its 9th week now.
9th. It is number 9.
I've never done this before on the show. I'm doing it because I totally believe in. At least this is something that we should know, and something we will never be taught, and certainly nothing that will be taught in school It's something that you have to be your own advocate, if you will. And that's the way I believe it originally was supposed to be. You are supposed to be your free and independent, your own advocate. You are supposed to be independent of all of this, free of all of this, free to move about the country in any way, shape, or form. Imagine that. Free to travel in whatever way you want. Free to earn money. Again, up until I think it was 1913, I think it all started with the Federal Reserve Act, which again is something that was forbidden, but yet happened. So when you look at what's happened in history, David brings it up in an excellent way. Those who are refuse to acknowledge or remember what's happened in history are doomed to repeat it again. And if you're somebody who remembers the good stuff and you repeat the good stuff, then you'll continue having good stuff. But if you're somebody who forgets about the bad stuff and they're able to pull the same tricks on you again, guess what's going to happen? And that's what's happening over and over and over. And we need to put an end to that. That's why I want something like this. This helps put an end to that. This helps put a balance back into the power that is being so badly abused today. Now, look at what's going on with the DOJ and different portions of this administration, where it's just open. They're investigating these people, and they're finding that these are just criminals. These people that were there. There's no other way to describe what they were doing. When somebody breaks a law knowingly, they knew they broke the law, and then they tried to hide it. Now it's being exposed. That's a criminal. He may not be a criminal in the sense like some people think that somebody like walks into a bank with a gun or something, but the offense itself, the breaking of the law, so it's the same thing, maybe even worse in some cases, because some of these turkeys have pins, and that could mean hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives affected by a signature on a piece of paper. So they're criminals. It's difficult to rein in a government that has just gone so crazy. We should be free and independent, a minimal amount of government. David brings up an excellent point. The militia. The militia should be part of the way that we live day in and day out. The way, if I understand it, I'll let David explain it. Correct me if I'm wrong. The militia should be made up of everyday people who are supported by the state, who report back, who have some kind of a system in place, but they're not SWAT teams. They're not all of that. They're just people who are taught properly how to use their weapons and called upon when they're needed. They're not, in essence, the what am I trying to say? They're not there for
the oligarchy.
Yeah. They're there to represent the state, which is really what we've gotten away from. We don't have that anymore. Think about that. We don't have, in Florida, we don't have the Florida militia. We have the National Guard. Same thing in whatever state you name. You don't have, that is acknowledged. You don't have a militia that is acknowledged. And they did away with that. They passed legislation to kind of circumvent all of that. So these are all the deceptive things that they have done over the years to get away with what they've achieved so far. And people like Milo and David have put in the time and the effort and the hours to say, you know what, this is wrong. And I'm not going to keep it to myself. I'm going to share it with other people. And they have been kind enough to share with me. And that's what one of my passions is to be able to share them. If I can see that what somebody is telling me is accurate and true, and it is to the betterment of everyone else, why not share it? And that's what we're trying to do tonight. So again, if you have a comment or you want to or you have a question, 561-440-5174. I have David and I have Milo, who can answer pretty much anything I can throw at them. So whatever you guys come up with, they can probably answer it as well. All right, so let me get back to David for a minute, because I mentioned the militia. David, you kind of, describe to me what you thought the militia was. Quickly tell me about that.
Sure. And by the way, I really do appreciate the name of your show, Riscalla. I got to say this. The Red Pill Reality Show. And obviously that comes from the movie The Matrix.
That's right.
2000, I think, was when that movie came out, or 1999 or sometime way back then. And that whole idea, of that this guy who was disturbed and trying to figure out what's going on, and all of a sudden he finds that there's this group that is working to try to, fix the world, and they offer him the blue pill or the red pill, and the way you start your show out and that jingle that goes on and everything, I just think it's so appropriate to the conversation we're having here, because if people will take that red pill, they're going to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, but in going deep into that hole, they're going to learn some very valuable information. And that's part of this, the kind of questions you're asking. It was all new to me when I first began to investigate. It was in about 2007 or 8 when I began to realize that the things that I thought about the militia weren't correct. And I had been carrying a Constitution in my back pocket for 20 years by then. And I had the Second Amendment wrong. And the militia, it comes from, it's 5 places in the Constitution, the federal Constitution, and it's also in every state constitution. So I guess the question we need to ask is, if it's there and we're not applying it, what's that about? That we wouldn't be applying a significant constitutional institution in our daily lives and haven't for a long time. And so what is it? Well, it's not defined in the U.S. Constitution, but it is defined in some of the state constitutions in the very basic way. And the most salient of them comes from the Virginia Declaration of Rights of 1776, which was written by George Mason, the founding father, George Mason, in Section 13. And it says this: a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. And the militia is essentially, and back in that day, I like to say that when people talked about the militia, it was about like talking about going through the drive-through at McDonald's. Everybody understood what it meant. You didn't have to talk about it. It was just common knowledge, because every man and every community experienced it, and therefore their wives and their children experienced it. And so what it was that in every state law, every set of state laws and the statutes at large, there was a provision that said that every able-bodied white male from the age of 16 or 17 and up, depending on which colony you were in at the time before the Constitution, was required to have a weapon. It started with muskets and then went to rifles, a well-suited rifle or a musket, and they were required to acquire one in the open market, and they were required to have, back in the day, you had not just the musket or the rifle, but you had the ramrod and the powder and the horn and the cartridge and a sack to put it in. And you were required to go and report at the age of 16 or 17 to the commander of the local militia company, usually a captain, and register to become enrolled in that militia company. And then you took an oath to the province and eventually to the state that you would swear allegiance to that state and go to musters, which, depending on if there was a serious event going on, go back to, for instance, the French and Indian War, or even the Revolutionary War in the days leading up to it, you might go every month and muster and go through training and go through, for instance, they would call a meeting of the local colonial militia company, and all that they would do that evening was read the entire manual of the regulations of the state militia or the provincial militia. And they read it from beginning to end. The sergeant would stand there or sit there and read it out loud so that nobody had any questions about what the laws were. And there were pages and pages of them. And then you would get together and you would train and do military maneuvers, marching and formations of attack or defense. Remember, the militia is always defensive, never offensive. That's one of the things that makes it different from a standing army or the Navy, is that its purpose was strictly to defend the community, never to attack. The only reason that you would ever go into an attack mode was in the event that you were in a situation where you have been attacked and you've got to attack for the purposes of defense. The militia also was essentially the police power of the day, and if in some circumstance you had to go after somebody who was at large, the men of the community would come together in the company and go find the guy. And it was a much simpler policing than we have today, but it was essentially the same functions that we have in our sheriff's departments today or our police forces today. In fact, many of the terms of art that we use when we talk about police were militia terms. For example, you've heard of the walking the beat. Well, in the state of Florida statutes, there was actually a provision that the county commissioners were required by law to come together and put together what they called a beat map in every county, where the commissioners, who obviously oversee a district of the county, were to lay out little territorial areas in their district and assign a group of 5 or so men in a small militia troop or whatever, made up of a officer and 4 rank and file, and they were on a rotating basis for 4 or 5 days. They would actually be on duty to protect that particular little aspect of town, and that was called the beat. And so every one of the commissioners was required to put together a beat map, and you know that if they didn't do it, they were fined $250 back in the 1800s.
Holy smokes.
For not putting that map together. That would be the equivalent today of about $12,500.
Holy smokes. Wow.
Because it was based on the silver dollar, which is worth about 20 or 25 bucks today. So this was no small change. And that was just one little piece, and that's where the word beat came from. You know how you talk about the cop walking his beat? Well, that was a militia term. And then the other term that we kind of take, we've heard in the police departments is that they're on a watch. They go on a watch or a night watch, or during the daytime, they would be. The term was a ward during the daytime, and we talk about police wards as the places where the police departments were located. And so these terms of art that we take advantage, we take it for granted today in our communities, were originally militia terms. And there's many, many others, but those ones are just simply, they come to mind off the top of my head. So the militia was essentially the police power, and one of their main functions is actually described in the U.S. Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, because when the militia is called into the service of the United States, the term that's used in Article 2, Section 2 under the presidency, he's the commander-in-chief of the militia when called into the actual service of the United States. Otherwise, the militia doesn't function within the United States government itself. And that's where the problem was, and we could talk about that if we want to, but let's leave that for a second. But the point is that what's that service of the United States? It's defined in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15. It says, and these are the powers of Congress that they oversee with respect to the government. And it says, Congress shall provide for calling forth the militia to do 3 things: to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. And that term, executing the laws of the Union, means that the militia were the ones that were supposed to do what the FBI does today, or the AFTBE, or the ICE, or the Department of Agriculture does when they're enforcing farming laws or whatever. Okay, those entities didn't exist as police power entities or agencies. The alphabet agencies never existed when the militia was here. The militia went away in 1908 that was the date that the Dick Law of 1903 put in place for the militia to be changed to be in the National Guard. Just so happens that's the same year that the FBI came into existence. Wow. There were no such things as chiefs of police until almost 1920. And so they filled a vacuum that was left by the militia being removed. There were no police departments anywhere in the United States until 1841, anywhere.
Didn't we have
and then
sheriffs?
It took another 20 to 25 years for them to be brought forth in the major cities, and never went into most of the communities until the late 1800s.
David, didn't we have sheriffs?
We had sheriffs, but that's it. You had a sheriff and constables. But a sheriff was one guy in an entire county, or two, or maybe three. He maybe had 4 or 5 deputies, but it wasn't what we have today, this massive police force. And by the way, Riscalla, have you ever seen a SWAT team?
They have the same identical equipment as a soldier that goes to war. It's just colored differently. Other than that, it's absolutely identical.
It would look just like a well-regulated militia, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, now you bring that point up. I didn't think of it that way. Yeah.
Well, see, what has happened is that they have replaced what is supposed to be the people's power with a Praetorian Guard. We have Praetorian Guards in this country.
See, was I right, David, when I said that it's supposed to be common day people? It's not supposed to be, these people that are in the police department that we see today. It's supposed to be your neighbors and stuff like that who are protecting each other. Is that the idea?
Yeah, let me give everybody that's listening, I can give a little assignment, and you can go do this, and you would be amazed. Fortunately, we have the archives of the New York Times. I've done this. That's why I know you can do this, okay? And you can go back and you can search the New York Times records and read every issue of the New York Times all the way back to the 1850s or 60s or sometime back then. And it just so happens that the New York Times actually recorded the names of every militia officer in the entire city when on a regular basis, okay? And I happened to go back and look at their list from the early 1900s, just before the Dick Law was implemented, okay? Because New York State was the last state to actually approve the provisions of the Dick Law and change the militia of the state of New York to the National Guard of New York as a different entity, okay? Up until the Dick Law, every able-bodied male in the state of New York was a member of the militia of the state of New York. It was called the National Guard of New York in 1862. But, and I think that the powers that be wanted to get that term to be common. And so they started right around the Civil War to get that term put into the modern nomenclature, so that by the time you get to the Dick Law and whatever that would have been called, they were planning this for a long time. But if you go back and you go to like 1895 or 1902, you will see a listing of tens of thousands of names of the men of the city of New York who were the officers of the militia of New York City, the militia company of New York City, broken down into companies, and then into regiments, and then into garrisons, and then into battalions, and then into divisions. And it was an entire military structure. And you had generals and colonels and majors and captains and lieutenants and a thing called ensigns and then sergeants and corporals all listed by name in the newspaper, in the New York Times.
So
And every city in the country and every town in the country had a listing of all the men who had officers all the way down to privates. You know, if you were just a militiaman, you were a private, and they had corporals that oversaw a group of 5 or 10 men, and then sergeants who saw over 25 or 30, and lieutenants who oversaw 100. It was a very well-defined and very well-articulated military structure in every state of the Union. Oh, by the way, also in the territories. I've got a copy of the Florida Militia Act of 1822, the year we became a territory. I have it right here. It's sitting right next to me in a 3-ring binder. I got right next to me.
So would it be fair to say that these there were regular people, though? I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
There were citizens of the state.
But they were
in the case of the territories, they were the residents. It doesn't say citizens of the state. It says citizens of the United States residing in that territory. That's what it says in the Florida Militia Act. But every able-bodied male had a duty to participate. Now, the question that you might raise is, why not the women? Not because they couldn't be, but because we deferred to the women and didn't require they had to serve. It was not that there's some difference in terms of constitutional law, and I don't mean in terms of the Constitution. I mean in law dealing with the way that the government is constituted. It's just that in our Western society, we give deference to women to not compel them to be involved in violent, issues where they could be harmed.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they couldn't be in that particular role if we felt it was necessary. And particularly back then, women couldn't even vote. Okay, they were not considered to be quote-unquote citizens until 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment. So, that's the nuance of that, if you will. That women didn't serve but I don't know if you ever heard of Mother Bathrick back during the Revolutionary War. She was 81 years old, and she literally held 5 redcoats at gunpoint with a musket on her own.
I like that.
So some of these women were pretty good too,
Yeah, that's some spunk. All right, I got a call coming in from area code 704, North Carolina. Area code 704. Are you there, 704? Okay, maybe I can't hear you. Maybe you are there and I can't hear you. What about area code 985? That's coming out of Louisiana, it looks like. Area code 985.
Yes, you are correct there, Riscalla.
This is Doug.
How's it going tonight?
Hey, thank you, Doug. Appreciate you taking the time to call in. So what do you, we're looking for people to kind of give us some feedback. What do you think about what we're talking about?
Well, I was in the Coast Guards, and my motto was, I'd rather save them than kill them, so what can I say?
Well, I mean, with the understanding that we're living under a government that really, technically, we shouldn't be living under, and that it was done in a deceptive and in one particular example, in a very forceful way, very militaristic way. Actually force somebody out and put their own people in. That's not America that I believed in anyway. And if that happened, and it is documented that it in fact happened, then what we're asking is it worth our time to try to restore that, to put that back the way it's supposed to be? Because once that occurs, there'll be a greater balance in what's going on within our country, and we don't see that today. You there, Doug?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm breaking up. It's these cheap headphones.
Okay.
Wireless headphones. So you're kind of breaking up. I probably got to charge them. I haven't been charged in a couple of days. Those lithium batteries, they'll go dead on you if you don't charge them every day. Just like a cell phone.
Oh, yeah. You got to let them. If you charge them all the time, though, you got to be careful. You'll wipe them out. So, have you got a comment, or have you got a question about? Do you think it's worth your time to have a discussion about this? Do you think it's worth your time to go through the work that is involved, the sacrifices that are going to be made in order to reestablish a state? Is that something that sounds interesting?
My question would be, is he talking about like the National Guard as the militia? Or is he talking about like just people taking up their own arms?
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
I can answer that. See, this has to do with the ruse, if you will, with the subversion that took place. I say surreptitious subversion, because what they did to us is they changed the rules, but they didn't tell us that they changed the rules. They made us think that things were going to be continuing, just being a bit more convenient. Back when the Dick Law of 1903 was passed, what the Dick Law did was put in place the National Guard as the militia of the state. But it wasn't the militia of the state that the Constitution defines as the militia of the state. The way I like to say it is this. Let's suppose Congress passed a law and said every cat is a dog. And then Congress passes a law that says all dogs will be on leashes, Doug. What would you see walking around?
You'd have to, I would see cats on leashes.
We already have a law around here that dogs have to be on leashes, but everybody ignores it.
Yeah, but the point would be that that's true. But the point is, you see a bunch of cats on leashes because Congress defined a cat to be a dog, right? Well, this is what they did with the Dick Law of 1903. They said that the National Guard of the state, territory, or District of Columbia will be the organized militia. Okay? But that term organized militia did not mean the same thing that the militia was. Able-bodied men of the state. It was 1 out of every 500 men, and they were going to be ultimately obligated to as national troops, not state troops. Because if you go to the definition of militia, in the Constitution it says that the appointment of the officers are going to be by the states, and the discipline was going to be provided by the states. And it was a state establishment, not a national establishment. But the National Guard is a national establishment. And so what they did is they put national troops in the states. And that is not the militia that is constitutionally defined. Now, here's the other reason we know that. In 1982, the United States Senate created a subcommittee under the Judiciary Committee. Orrin Hatch and Strom Thurmond were the chairman of it, and people like Teddy Kennedy and Dennis DeConcini of Arizona and several other very popularly known senators from the day were on this committee. And it was called the United States Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Second Amendment to the Constitution. And they put together a report. A lot of work went into this. And that report was published in 1982. And in the second to the last paragraph of that report, they made this statement. They said, the National Guard is not the, quote, capital M-I-L-I-T-I-A, end quote, as described in the Second Amendment. It's not the militia with a capital M that's described in the Second Amendment. So the United States Senate knows that the National Guard is not the militia. Yet, from its inception in 1903, it was called the organized militia, but with a little m. And this is one time where whether it's a capital M or a little m makes a difference. And the reason is because what they were doing is they were changing the polity, the way the people are organized politically in this country, Now, Milo will come in and chime in, I know, that change had taken place 40-some years earlier in the raw base of it, but this is how it began to be flushed out in practical terms and how the police power is being applied.
Totally agree
so
with you,
it's
David.
just so yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear it. I'm starting to get it, Milo. Okay, but see, this is the point: is that they couldn't have done this all in one step. Had they done this all in one step, we would have gone completely berserk. We would have completely taken them out. Anybody trying to undermine, because we would have seen that they are enemies. They are domestic enemies of the United States. We would have seen it in a heartbeat.
Someone, I just want to interject this real quick. Someone, and it may have been you, David, I can't recall for certain, pointed out to me that Secretary of State, I think, Seward, however you say his name, S-E-W-A-R-D, at the end of the Civil War, I think it was you, indicated that there would never be another opportunity for the states to rise up, so to speak, and that this dismantling of state sovereignty and then ultimately the dismantling of the militia was all going to be part of the game plan for how to prevent even the possibility of states being able to exert their sovereignty in any sense, really, but in particular, as they were concerned about it, in the sense of whether they wanted to leave the Union or just threaten nullification or interposition or whatever. So was that you that pointed that out to me at some point?
Yeah, it was actually Secretary of War Edwin Stanton that said that at the end of the Civil War. Yeah. Yep. He said we will never allow the states to ever again be able to create a civil war. And I'm sure there were other intentions of that, but that's the one that he specifically stated right after the war. Yep.
All right. Well, hang on, because we're going to take a break and then we'll come back. Doug, hang on there with us. If you've got another comment or another question, we'll be happy to hear it. And don't go away. You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. Tonight I have Milo Townsend. I have David Callihan. We're continuing the discussion about the 14th Amendment and the subjects around it, and want to hear from you guys. Want to hear your comments and your questions. The lines are open. The phone number is 561-440-5174, and we will be right back.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show on the LNM Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Do you need toner for your Epson, Hewlett-Packard, Canon, Brother, Apple, or Sharp printers? Look no further than Laser Technologies. In business for over 20 years, they offer the lowest prices on toner on the web. They can also repair your laser printers and toners fast and easy. Call their expert staff today at 561-792-9600 or email us at service@laser-technologies.com for all your toner needs. All toner is shipped nationwide. Why wait? Get the lowest prices on toner. Call or email us today.
Grace has some pretty stellar arms, like Serena Williams good, but her face is pretty disgusting.
Someone please tell him to go back into his closet and leave us alone.
Britney's face is so stupid and I hate her so much. It's like a scientist created her in a lab to annoy humanity and didn't even do that good of a job.
Megan reminds me of a troll doll that came to life intent on killing us with her stupidity.
Why is Grace's head so big? It definitely has nothing to do with how smart she is and probably everything to do with how bloated she is.
He's so funny. Just kidding. Who would find this disfigured flamingo funny?
Never post a selfie of yourself. You look so ugly.
The only reason you have so many views is because we think you're a freak and we can't look away.
Megan is the main reason that the world sucks so much.
I would rather get cancer than listen to another Trevor Moran song.
You are a mistake. You should have never been born.
Drown yourself in a shallow puddle, please.
Wow, I hope she's sterile.
These really stopped being funny a long time ago.
You're so much more than the things that people say about you.
Those people have no right to say cruel things to you to make themselves feel better.
It's okay that you sound different than everyone else.
That's what makes you so special.
We will not tolerate it.
We will not tolerate it.
We will not tolerate
We will
it.
not tolerate it.
Every day, people make me feel like I stand out simply because of the way that I look.
Every day, people make me feel small.
Every day, I face the cruel words of bullying. And every day, people tell me that I'm brave for enduring this humiliation.
But we're not the brave ones.
It's the ones that say no to the bullying.
The witnesses.
And if we all join together, there's nothing that we can't do. We will no longer be the silent majority.
When we see bullying online,
We will let the world know that we're going to take action with the eye.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
Our actions will overpower cruel words.
I am a witness.
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 There is power in words.
But it's nothing compared to the power of the actions that we put behind our words.
Visit eyewitnessbullying.org to learn more.
I am a witness, and so are you.
Better than Late Night in the Midlands.
There's nothing better than Late Night in the Midlands. I love to talk to people from the heartland. They're tremendous people, they really are.
Opinions, politics.
I'm going to give you 10 minutes tonight because you're tremendous people.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, she's a horror show.
Elizabeth Warren. Pocahontas.
But I mean, Elizabeth Warren, I love my Pocahontas. She is the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh, and good old Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, oh my God, what a communist. He's not even a socialist. He is such a communist.
Then there's Sloppy Joe. Sleepy Joe.
Sleepy Joe Biden. Every time he sniffs a little girl's head.
You heard the man. Nothing better. Late Night in the Midlands. We cover everything.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Goes, 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 goes,
Now, from sunny South Florida, it's the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscalla. Every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to midnight on the L&M Network. And now, your host, Riscalla.
All right, we are back. It is the Red Pill Reality Show. I am your host, Riscalla. You can find us here on the LNM Network. If you go to www.latenightinthemidlands.com, you can find us there. You can click on the Listen Live. You can also find our chat room there. There's a chat room that is free of charge, and join in with some of the people there on the chat room. You can also listen to us live on the Facebook page that we have. If you go to Facebook and locate the Red Pill Reality Show, click on Contact Us. That will get you right onto the server, and you can listen live there as well. Let's see. If you're one of those people who has unlimited calling, and or you have a landline, maybe you have a landline, and you'd like to listen to the show, we actually have a number that you can call in on. That area code, that number is area code 701-719-9704. So we try to make it easy for you to listen, because we're very grateful for those of you who participate in helping this network continue. Those of you who have subscribed, greatly appreciate each one of you who have done that. I don't ask anything of people that I don't do myself. I am a subscriber. I've been a subscriber from the very beginning because I believe in the LNM radio network. Sometimes it's entertaining. Sometimes the information, like we have been covering for the past 8 shows, to me, is vital. Vital because this could truly begin to make a change, a positive change in our country. A permanent change if people will wake up and realize that we have a responsibility. So much has been taken from us. I've given the analogy of the dollar. When I was growing up, we had this thing called a silver certificate. And I cut the grass for my dad one weekend, and he gave me 2 of these dollar bills. And I said, Dad, I want the silver dollar. I want them because it was big, it was heavy, and it was the largest of the coins that we carried at the time. It was far heavier than any of them, and it just felt good to have this piece of money. And he said, take it to the bank on Monday when the bank opens up after school. Go there and tell the lady that you want $2 silver dollars, and she'll give you $2 silver dollars. And that's what I did. You couldn't do that today. That dollar that he gave me in paper form is worth 13 times minimum, 13 times more than the dollar that we have today. So if you're somebody who only makes $15 an hour, imagine if that $15 that you earned had 13 times more the value than it does today. This is how we had back then. One parent, if it was so chosen, one parent would work outside the home, one parent would work inside the home. And the advantage of that is the building of the family, the strong bonds of the family. And all of that has gone by the wayside. We don't have that anymore. We have a mom and we have a dad, and both of them are working just to make sure that they have shelter, for Pete's sake. It's not the way it's supposed to be, guys. It's just not. And if you are somebody who's interested in changing that, and you want to hear about how to go about changing that, one of the ways, there are many ways we could do it, but this is one of the ways which I see as a viable way, a legal way, a nonviolent way, because all we're doing is just asking for restoration. We're not looking to overthrow anybody. We're looking to make things right that were wrong. That's all. All right, we're back. Let me...
I used to mow the lawn. I used to mow the lawn for a Kennedy 50-cent piece. Remember those?
Yeah. That was...
Yeah.
That was...
Whatever happened to those? You can't find them no more.
That was my mom's favorite coin after he was assassinated. There aren't very many of them out there anymore. They're not circulated like they used to be. But my point being with the silver dollar was, it was a silver certificate. Look at what we have today. It says a Federal Reserve note. It's nothing but a fancy IOU. In technical terms, it's a fabricated piece of monetary currency, which in reality would be nothing more than fraudulent. It's a fraudulent it's not real. And in reality, it's not. There's nothing that guarantees that dollar. And that's why we've had so many problems with some of these, quote, dictators overseas, because they introduce something that is gold-backed. This is what happened in Iraq. Saddam Hussein introduced a gold-backed currency, and he said, I'm not going to use the petrodollar anymore. Same thing that happened in Libya. Libya said, we're not using the petrodollar. He introduced gold-backed. He introduced the dinar. And same thing had happened in Syria. They got tired of using dollars that really had no value, only perception. That's the only value that they have. And then you see, all you got to do, you see the dots and you just connect the dots. Oh, and what happened in Iran? Iran refused to allow one of these Rothschild-backed banks in Iran. Now Iran is our enemy. The same thing in Syria. The same thing that happened in Libya. It's the same thing that happened in Iraq. It's a repetitive action over and over and over again, all done in our names. And I'm presenting to you that this is not the way it's supposed to be. This is not the way it was intended to be. David was talking about the militia. Let me hang on just a moment, Dave. Let me get to Milo, because I think Milo had a comment, and then I'll get back to Dave in a moment. Milo, did you have a comment?
Well, actually, since you're giving me an opportunity, I would like to clarify that what I said before the break regarding the quote from Secretary of War Stanton about the states never being able to create another civil war. What we're about is not secession. We're not a secessionist movement. Our objective is not to create states that are outside the Union. In fact, quite the contrary. We want to restore the federal Union under the original Constitution. That is our goal. So I just wanted to clarify that our objective is not to give the states the powers to create another civil war or even to secede, although I will say that I do personally believe that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that secession is not only lawful and legitimate, but that we've done it, in fact, a number of times in our history, and that July 4th is one of those instances that we celebrate secession every year. We celebrate the secession of 13 colonies from the British Empire, and yet we turn around and we say, well, the Civil War answered all the questions about secession, and that's not lawful anymore. Well, first of all, a war doesn't answer questions of what is and isn't lawful. But second of all, isn't that a little bit hypocritical of us to say, well, it was right when we did it one time, but then when these other states decided to do it, well, it was wrong then. So, I personally would defend the concept, but not advocate for the practice of secession. I just wanted to clarify that that's not what we're about, though. We are aimed at restoring the constitutional federal union. So that's all I really had to say on that. It's just a matter of responsibility and again, I've said it before, self-determination, the power to decide your own destiny, to have government of the consent of the people. And that's what we aim for. And I think that's what David is aiming for when he speaks about the powers of the militia and the militia structure that was stricken from American culture generally.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I think Milo is hitting on an important point here. What are we trying to do? All we're really trying to do is restore what I call vested authority. Right now in America, we have two different groups of citizens. John Whitehead points this out in his book, a very profound book, Battlefield America, The War on the American People. He says we have two sets of laws in this country, a set for the elite and a set for the common regular citizens. And putting aside the legal issue of whether we're state citizens or national citizens for a moment, there's absolutely in the practical de facto government a twin-tiered system of enforcement of law. Very simple example proves the point. Most people paying any attention to what's going on in America are pretty clear that Mrs. Clinton committed some crimes. But she's never even been arrested. She hasn't been detained in any way for the things that she did. The head of the FBI, Comey, he wouldn't even do anything with respect to what he learned of the things that she did that were inappropriate. In other words, if you are in a privileged class, meaning you're in some public position, you have an immunity that is not available to the average Joe Blow or Susie Blow. We don't have these privileges. And that is something that bothers a lot of people. But the problem is that we don't really understand the framework, the overall jeepers, I can't think of the right word, the structure of things that allows for these duplicities to happen, these double standards to happen. And the reason that there's a problem is because this is like peeling, layers off an onion. And we're just starting to peel back the layers. And it takes a lot of effort. There's a lot of study that goes into even understanding how to remove one layer and go down another level and then go down another level. And one of the things that John and Milo and the people in America's Remedy have figured out is how to get down to the core of the onion and bypass all the layers. I think that I've written a book, it's 770 pages right now. It's called The Political Matrix. And there are different concepts in this book that people really need to understand about the way things operate. There's a lot of information in there about the militia structure and the history of how the militia was removed. But there's also information there about, for instance, I don't know, Riscalla, I think we may have talked about it briefly, but there are at least 8 legal relations that every citizen has, every American has, not even as a citizen, just as an American. We talk about rights all the time. I've got my rights. Rights are not just unalienable rights. We have constitutional rights. We have civil rights. That is actually a term of art. And there's, depending on your framework of which you think about the law, like I know that Milo and I might have a difference of opinion about what civil rights are or how they're applied, but the point is that there is in the history of our country going back centuries, there's articulation of the rights of the people. Okay, but rights is only one of 8 legal relations. What about our duties? That is as much an important part of what we are as Americans as our rights are. And there are a duty, if it doesn't have a sanction associated to it, isn't really a duty. It's just a nice opportunity. But duties are where you have a requirement that if you fail to fulfill it, you are sanctioned. And the duty to participate in a militia is no longer a duty. It's been taken away. But we need to understand what our duties are. Then we have privileges. Being an elector is a privilege. It's not a duty. You don't have to vote. Okay? Then we have immunities. Immunities are the opportunity to not be held liable when you do something that might harm someone else, legally harm somebody else, and might rightfully harm somebody else. For instance, if you perform a citizen's arrest, you have an immunity that you're not going to be prosecuted for detaining somebody. So we have rights, we have privileges, we have duties, we have immunities, and we also have powers. Powers are those capabilities that allow us to do things in our legal standing as an American. These 5 privileges, these 5 what we might call abilities, legal abilities, are then contrasted to 3 disability or vulnerabilities. One of those vulnerabilities is a liability. When somebody does something against you that they shouldn't do, they're liable. Another is a disability, things that they don't have the capability of doing. And the other is no rights, things that you don't have a right to do. And the point is, because we don't understand these 8 legal relations, we're hamstrung. We're not empowered in a way that we can really function as Americans. So and this is in my book. We also, for instance, Riscalla, most people don't realize that before the Declaration of Independence, there were probably 1,000 constitutions or other legal documents that were actually framed by the people of the continent of America. Over 1,000 of them. The people, prior to the Declaration of Independence, understood their powers tremendously better than we do, and how to use those in everyday life. We are so dumbed down. Charlotte Isabet was a lady back during the Reagan administration. She was part of the Department of Education, and she got fired because she was starting to expose some of the bad things we were doing in education. She wrote a book called The Dumbing Down of America. And it's a classic. And there's no doubt that we have been completely dumbed down as Americans. Totally. We don't have any clue as to what powers we have. My dear friend Edwin Vieira, Dr. Edwin Vieira, who has written 3,000 pages on the militia and 1,500 pages on the banking system in books. He's got other things in blogs and other articles he's written, but 4,500 pages on those two subjects. When I was talking to him about this a couple of years ago, I said, so, Edwin, are you saying that we have powers? He said, we have infinite powers. Now, this is a man that's won 3 cases, or he's argued 3 cases before the Supreme Court, won 2 of them himself, and that third one was recently, based on the same arguments he did 20 years ago, has now been in his favor. So I suggest that he's actually won 3 cases before the Supreme Court. And he says we have infinite powers as American citizens. And so that's a pretty profound statement in terms of what our capabilities are, that we aren't applying at all.
I think that has been conditioned out of us. That mentality has been conditioned out of us. And it's been done by this systematic. It's been done in a systematic way by this system that we live in. And it's done on purpose, because they can't have. If we were, think about this for a minute, if the general populace of this country were of the mentality of the general populace of this country back in as early as maybe the early 1900s, the late 1800s, none of these people would be getting away with any of what they're getting away with. These brazen calls for a disarmament of the citizenry, they would probably, I'm assuming because I didn't live during that time, but I think their mentality would have been they would have gotten pitchforks and torches together. They would have gone down to wherever who was responsible for whether it was a mayor, a senator, a congressman, whatever that was, and physically removed them from office, tarred and feathered them, put them on a horse, and told them to get the hell out of town. They would never have put up,
They wouldn't have used pitchforks and poles. They would have taken out their rifle, and put it on their shoulder, and they would have marched in formation.
The militia,
dealt with those public officials.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where we lost, because we would have had the militia that would have trained people, and
they would have had the vested authority, meaning that they would have had authority that was legislated to do their job.
So that's where the balance has gone. You hear about these people and some of the things that they do is just atrocious. You think about this for a minute. Now, I know that the mainstream media would have you believe that Joe Biden has done nothing wrong. God bless you for believing in him. But the truth of the matter is, the facts show differently. There are documents that show that he has done something wrong. There are documents that show that his son, now they're saying as much as $160,000 a month his son was receiving through a variety of avenues, primarily from this Ukraine deal that was going on. And even when his son was interviewed, he said and asked, do you think you would have gotten the job if your last name wasn't Biden? And he said, probably not. So it's an admittance that they're using the name to advance, to make money, and the name is only valuable because it had, at the time, the office of the vice president. And that's not the way this country was intended to be. Those are not the kind of people that represent, it doesn't represent me. I don't know why he thinks that he's the vice president of the United States that I would be proud of. We've got to get away from this. The balance is gone. And I see more and more that we talk about this, I see where the purposeful balance that there was at one time in place, and how meticulously it has been removed. Very little bit here, very little bit there, and then set up in such a way where it's so difficult to get it back because it has gone on for so long. People think this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yep.
Doug, have you got a
frog in the pot of water?
Yeah, exactly. You got a comment, Doug? Doug. He's there. I can see him. He's probably yakking in the chat room. We'll get back.
No, I wasn't. I was yakking at Michael Vera.
I was asking.
Trying to cheer him up, you know. I really wasn't listening because my headphones are crackling, and I'm too lazy to go over to turn on the speakers on the computer.
Oh, you little worm, you. All right. Well, I was going to ask you if you had a comment. Well, do you think that this is worth pursuing, this kind of a subject where we have learned, again, this is not a theory. This is in fact documented. We have learned where our nation was overthrown back in the late 1860s, or early 1860s, excuse me. We know that it was done in a deceptive manner, and part of it was done in a militaristic manner. Do you think it's worth pursuing? Do you think this is something that we should continue going down the proverbial rabbit hole about?
Is this going to be another war between the states, like during the Civil War?
Good question. How would you, Milo, how do you address that?
Well, I certainly hope it doesn't turn into another war between the states. We've already got a cultural war going on.
Yeah.
And, you have sort of 150 years of people trying to alter our form of government more or less openly, varying from time to time. But we can clearly see the consequences of that, and there's a lot of strain and a lot of stress. And honestly, I'll just be frank with you. What I see as the greatest danger to an open, armed conflict is when you try to coerce people to all conform to a singular national standard. And you're in Louisiana, I'm in North Carolina, Riscalla and David are in Florida. I know people in Texas, I know people in Oklahoma, I know people in Virginia, I know people all over the country that all have different perspectives on where they would like their state's policy to go in any given area of law. Whether it's marijuana legalization or Second Amendment rights or land use or, rainwater collection or vaccines or you name it. There's just an endless plethora of subjects or topics on which we are always being coerced from a national level to try to all fit into the same mold. And I think I've expressed it before on this show, and I know I have elsewhere. It's a phrase that our director of media, Cliff Muncy, sort of coined several years ago. I don't even know when. But his whole concept here was to try to express that federalism, as opposed to nationalism, that is, federalism being defined as the paradigm that was put in place by the Constitution that incorporated demi-sovereign states and incorporated the idea of subsidiarity, local home rule, self-government. That, when I say federalism, that's what I mean. And federalism is a pressure release valve. It's something that we don't have anymore, and it's something that we desperately need. in order to avoid precisely that kind of civil war that you're talking about. You ask if it's going to result in armed conflict, but look what happened a couple of years ago in Virginia, and that's just one example out of any number of examples that I could give you of the direction that we're headed in. And the reason we're headed in that direction, again, is because there's this system of power in place that is trying to force all of us to fit into the same mold. We have no more home rule, no more control over our own destiny. State sovereignty is gone.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I mean, that's not just my assertion. That's not just, that's not hyperbole at all. That is a fact. State sovereignty is gone.
Yeah, that's pretty evident. Yeah.
What's that?
That's pretty evident that state sovereignty
Yeah.
has been just eaten up. It's gone. It doesn't exist.
Right, eradicated.
Yeah.
So, in order to have a pressure release valve to avoid that kind of conflagration that would turn into an open war, I really think that this is a solution to that, not a contributing factor to that.
Well, wouldn't it be giving more power back to the individual states?
It certainly would. That's the whole idea.
So then why would we want to fight with each other? I think that would...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let me chime in and make this response. I think that the question, and with all due respect, Doug, that will this result in another civil war is really a red herring, because the whole reason that this civil war happened was because of an abuse of power. And the states were not allowed to do what they should have done, which would be to negotiate the prevention of the war by the governmental authority and the president and the Congress being unbalanced to have control to an extent that they forced a war to happen that wasn't because the states wanted the war, but because the general government wanted the war. And unfortunately, I would submit that part of the reason that happened was because there wasn't a proper institution in place to mitigate that from happening. There wasn't an ability of the people themselves to have their say in what was going on. If you know anything of the history of the time, there were a lot of people in the North that did not want to go to war. And they protested in mobs in New York City, but they were shut down by the president. That's a historical fact. And there was, this was not a, unanimous or even a majority decision. This was a decision by men who usurped authority. And unfortunately, that always can happen. To then say, well, we're going to never let it happen again by taking away what probably is the most viable way to prevent such a thing from happening, to mitigate the thing from happening, results in a situation where you have the people being suppressed in their freedom. When you have a national government, you're one step away from totalitarianism, and we're going down that road. There are people who are a lot more knowledgeable than me on this subject who believe that we're heading down that road. We're going, and because history is replete with examples of when you get to a place where you have a military-industrial complex, you have a police state, you have a top-down governmental structure, totalitarianism is not too far away. And what happens when you have each of the several states having independent demi-sovereignty is you've got the ability to prevent there being this top-down type of a structure that can take away freedom and lead us to dictatorial society.
More balancing, right? Would you agree?
Yep, more balanced, yes.
So
Put the
Doug,
power in the
does
hands
that-
of the people themselves.
Does that, Doug? Does that help you? I mean, what is your response? I'm curious if that's our answer based on the evidence that we've seen and the information that we're aware of, to think that this is actually it's actually a preventive measure to that eventuality in some ways. I mean, how does that make you feel about the idea on the whole?
No, I was just thinking that the politicians, that our legislature and stuff like that, are supposed to be representing us, and they're not really doing that. I'd still like to see a federal budget passed for the year, but no, they got to go off and have secret meetings and try to impeachment and all that stuff. It's like you're only thinking of yourselves. You're not even thinking of the people. So,
Well, imagine if you have a militia company in a community in which your representative was accountable to it and have to give a report on a regular basis to the men of and women of the local community as to how they are doing their job at the city level or the county level or the state level or the federal level, because they are a member of that company, they are a militia member in that community, and they are accountable to the men and women in their community. By the way, that in Dr. Edwin Vieira's book, Sword and Sovereignty, a 2,300-page book, he actually has a chapter on that specific subject, and that would be a way that the militia would provide a means of accountability of every elected official. We don't have any system in place today to force our representatives, because the Constitution says that every representative at the federal and state level has an obligation to an oath or affirmation to support the Constitution of the state and the federal government. But we have no mechanism in place for that accountability to be exercised.
Right.
And the reason is because...
I raised my hand just like Riscalla did when we joined the military. We were sworn to defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Isn't that right there, Riscalla?
Amen.
By the way, in the state of Florida, if you are a voter, you've raised your hand and taken that oath.
I never knew that until Dave brought that up. Where did you see that?
It's in our Constitution.
Wow. Yeah, so
By the way, something else in our Constitution, it says in Article 1, Section 6, I think it says that the people of Florida have the right peacefully to assemble, to instruct their representatives, and to petition for redress of grievances.
And if we tried to do that today, guess what would happen?
Because we don't have a mechanism for its enforcement.
We would be declared domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying. These areas are where we have had our rights literally stolen from us. Of course, we have this right to do that, but I promise you, I can tell you a particular example comes to mind is the Bundy family. I think they're in Nevada, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong about the state, but they're out west somewhere.
You're correct. They're in Nevada.
And they legally took every step they could to avoid a conflict with the government, and it boiled down to who had guns, basically, is what stopped it. That's the mentality of the people that we have today that are, quote, in our government. There's still many of them there. They're still doing the horrors that they're doing it to some of those people out west. Unspeakable stuff. We got to make, to me, it doesn't require a brain surgeon. We need to make this better. Well, here is an offer by some people who have done a heck of a lot of research, and in some cases actually not only talked it, but walked it, about doing something to make things a lot better. Bringing back, I think of it as a balance. I see it in my mind as a balance, that the people who did all this, who put all this together for us initially, that they could see how different people were going to act and how there were different areas that if they didn't have checks and balances, proper checks and balances, they could get out of hand. And clearly we don't have proper checks and balances, even in this system that we have today, which is not what was intended for us. But clearly it's not there even in this system. And I think part of that is because something that we've talked about just a few moments ago, and that was the responsibilities. We have responsibilities as citizens. It's been conditioned out of us, programmed out of us. You just work and pay your taxes and take care of your family and everything's going to be fine. We're going to take care of you. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And the more of we're going to take care of you, the worse it's going to become. For many of us who think along the lines that we're discussing tonight, who think for ourselves, we're not allowing someone to tell us how to think or how to feel or how to respond. We look at the situation and come to our own conclusion. And those of us who can think for ourselves, I believe, would come to the same conclusion when presented with this evidence that we have. Documented evidence that people deceivingly overtook our nation back in 1861, and through that, we are seeing what we're seeing today, a total, and I refer to it as an imbalance. It's completely out of balance. Government, a government that is more of a big brother over your shoulder. We don't care. We're going to intrude into your very life at every aspect we feel like it, because it is for, quote, national security. That's not the way it's supposed to be, you guys. You'll never convince me that what we have today is the way it's supposed to be. I go back to the two words that John F. Kennedy used time and again, and that was free and independent. We are supposed to be free and independent. Now, with the independent comes a big responsibility, as does with the free. You want to remain free, you better know what the heck is going on, because if you don't, people will deceive you, which is exactly what has happened to us. And before you know it, you'll be rounded up just like animals are rounded up. You think that I'm exaggerating. This is exactly how it's been done time and time again. David brings out an excellent point. Those who don't remember the bad future, bad history, are what is it, Dave? They're determined to repeat it again, right?
Yeah, condemned to repeat it.
That's what it is. And that's the truth. I mean, I can see that on a micro scale in people that I know and the relationships that they have. And they go from one relationship to another, and the people outside the relationship can see this isn't going anywhere. But the people inside the relationship are so wound up with whatever it is that they have, they're hell-bent determined to be that way, and before you know it, there's a nuclear war going on. So you can be easily swayed. If you can't learn from the mistakes that you've made, you're going to make them again, time and time and time again. And life's just going to be a you-know-what. That's why some people are like that, because they don't look back, they don't remember, they don't evaluate their history. They just look forward and never have any reference from looking forward. They never have any reference from behind. And if we...
Hey, take it from the other side, though. Also, go back and remember the good past. That we had a time in our society back when there was just before the revolution, where the people saw what was coming. They saw the overreach of the British government. They saw the economic pressure that they were feeling, that they were being taxed against their wills, and they were being that the East India Company was, attempting to get their goods imposed upon them, and they knew that it wasn't right, and they organized themselves in such a way to resist it, and they utilized the tools of government that they had at their disposal, and because of it, they were able to not only stop the atrocities being committed, but they created a new society in which they had more freedom. And if we aren't willing to remember the good past, we're going to get what's coming to us. So that's why it's important to remember all of the past, not just the bad past, but the good past too, and apply it appropriately in a modern context.
Good point.
And that's really, in my opinion, what we need to really start taking some time to wrap our minds around, because people are doing all kinds of things today. Go ahead, Milo.
I was just going to say I agree with you, because that's the blueprint for how to fix what we're contending with now.
Agreed. Because people are trying. Look at all the things that people are attempting to do. That is a waste of time and effort and intellectual and mental energy, thinking that it's going to get. I mean, over the last 10 or 15 years, there are a lot of people that tried to stand up and do so. Look at the Ron Paul movement, the Ron Paul revolution. How many people Milo and I both did. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to get him elected, and worked like crazy, seeing what the political machine was doing to make sure it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And we're 6-7 years later. Is anything any better? Not at all.
No.
It's worse.
No. No.
Because we've been going down roads that are using the system as it is, which has been designed to benefit a very, very few people. And yet we're not going to do something different to, achieve the result we're trying to achieve. That's the whole point.
That was something that I kind of wanted to say, and I don't mean any disrespect to Doug, your caller, when he said what he did about those representatives are just up there enriching themselves and thinking about themselves and not
That's true.
concerned with the voters. I mean, I know it is true,
Yep.
but it's that way by design.
Yeah,
And what I wanted to say, but didn't at the time, although I'm going to now, is that, people have got to get out of this mindset that the answers exist in that system. They've got to get out of this mindset that what is literally an illegitimate system built from the ground up on a coup d'etat, an act of overt treason, that system is not based in law. It has no affiliation to lawfulness. It gives the appearance of operating in some quasi-lawful manner, but that system is, I don't know what the language policy is on your show. Bleep this out later if you have to. But one of my favorite phrases that I describe this as is, you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. And that's what that system is. You can't build a constitutional republic, much less restore one, from what you've got to work with. The building blocks you're working with in that system as it exists today are literally based on the overthrow of law.
And you see it. You see them doing it. You see them overthrowing the law right now with this whole impeachment thing. The way that the entire impeachment thing is going, they're not.
Every day.
So we can tell that what we're talking about isn't a theory. It's happening before our eyes. This is actually occurring before our eyes. And what are we going to do about it? Are we going to sit back and remain silent? To me, the answer is hell no. I'm not going to sit back, and I'm going to see what else that we can do, because there are people who are hell-bent on dividing this country to the point where there is all-out war. I want to avoid that in whatever way I can. I want to avoid that. But I continue to hear more and more talk about this civil war that is coming, because we're being pushed against each other, against a system that is corrupt. And the only way that anybody is going to win is when whoever it is, has the most guns, has the most powerful guns. And that, unfortunately, is these people that are in our government. They want to take ours away, so when that day comes, we're less able to defend ourselves. That's really what it boils down to. That's really what gun control is all about. If you think that gun control is about protecting children, Consider this for a moment. When you walk up to most of these banks, isn't there an armed guard at the bank protecting the bank, protecting the money, right? How many armed guards are there at these schools? In many cases, there's nobody. And then when there is a guard, a police officer here in Florida, they refuse to act. That ought to tell you something right there. It's just a system that is just an excellent point, Milo, that the system is messed up already. It's so messed up that how are you going to unmess something that's already messed up? And the way to do it is to go back to what was intended to be, to get out of this thing, and to go back to the way it was supposed to be and return to the balance. To me, it's all
what we're
about
talking
the
about
balance.
is restoration.
Yeah. To me, it's about the balance. All right, going to take one more break, and then we're going to be coming back. You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show tonight. I have Milo Townsend. I have David Callihan. And right now I have Doug. He's going to be one of our call-ins. Actually, Doug is one of our producers on the L&M radio network. So thank you for your help, Doug. I greatly appreciate it. Hang in there. We're not going to go far, and we'll be right back.
You're welcome.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show on the LNM Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Do you need toner for your Epson, Hewlett-Packard, Canon, Brother, Apple, or Sharp printers? Look no further than Laser Technologies. In business for over 20 years, they offer the lowest prices on toner on the web. They can also repair your laser printers and toners fast and easy. Call their expert staff today at 561-792-9600 or email us at service@laser-technologies.com for all your toner needs. All toner is shipped nationwide. Why wait? Get the lowest prices on toner. Call or email us today.
Grace has some pretty stellar arms, like Serena Williams good, but her face is pretty disgusting.
Someone please tell him to go back into his closet and leave us alone.
Brittany's face is so stupid and I hate her so much. It's like a scientist created her in a lab to annoy humanity and didn't even do that good of a job.
Megan reminds me of a troll doll that came to life intent on killing us with her stupidity.
Why is Grace's head so big? It definitely has nothing to do with how smart she is and probably everything to do with how bloated she is.
He's so funny. Just kidding. Who would find this disfigured flamingo funny?
Never post a selfie of yourself. You look so ugly.
The only reason you have so many views is because we think you're a freak and we can't look away.
Megan is the main reason that the world sucks so much.
I would rather get cancer than listen to another Trevor Moran song.
You are a mistake. You should have never been born.
Drown yourself in a shallow puddle, please.
Wow, I hope she's sterile.
These really stopped being funny a long time ago.
You're so much more than the things that people say about you.
Those people have no right to say cruel things to you to make themselves feel better.
It's okay that you sound different than everyone else.
That's what makes you so special.
We will not tolerate it.
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 Every day, people make me feel like I stand out simply because of the way that I look.
Every day, people make me feel small.
Every day, I face the cruel words of bullying.
And every day, people tell me that I'm brave for enduring this humiliation.
But we're not the brave ones.
It's the ones that say no to the bullying.
The witnesses.
If we all join together, there's nothing that we can't do. We will no longer be the silent majority.
When we see bullying online,
We will let the world know that we're going to take action with the eye.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
Our actions will overpower cruel words.
I am a witness.
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 There is power in words.
But it's nothing compared to the power of the actions that we put behind our words.
Visit eyewitnessbullying.org to learn more.
I am a witness, and so are you.
You're listening to WCET FM, America's talk station. Schumer, it must be a tumor that's making you say the things you say. Schumer, it must be a tumor making you say the same things they say. And when you lie, which is every day, I must just call it what it is. Schumer, it must be a tumor that's making you say the things you say. Schumer, it must be a tumor making you say the same things they say. And when you lie, which is every day, I must call it what it is. And when you lie, which is every day, it is treasonous.
Now, if that's not crazy. Yes, you're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. That was Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. That was his parody about Mr. Schumer, one of the wonderful people that we have within our government doing such a good job for us. Such a good job. That's about as far as I'll carry that, because I'll get in trouble. I say that. So let me bring my guests back on. We have Milo Townsend, and we have David Callihan, and we have Doug, who is calling in as one of our callers. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. I think we were at, where were we when we left? Were we with Milo?
I have no idea. I'm still wrapped up in the tumor song.
That Michael likes to do those parody songs, and Doug was kind enough to send me that, and I said, okay, we'll play it at the break. Well, I had this first time I heard it, but we played at the break.
Yeah, I heard you guys starting to crack up in the background.
It's pretty funny.
It's pretty funny.
Well, thank you, Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. I appreciate that, and a nice, a good laugh, because what we've been talking about is some pretty serious stuff, and it's not the kind of stuff that you find people talking about on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, it's been purposely been cut out of our basic conversations for reasons of being able to continue in the deception and in the ability to have this power and the control over this power. So anyway, thank you to both of you guys. I appreciate you sharing the knowledge and the experiences that you've had. It's again, we don't even teach this kind of stuff in school anymore. This is what's shameful. As a matter of fact, we taught civics in school when I was growing up. I took several classes in civics. We weren't taught this. And I think that was purposeful, because if we had been taught this as we got older, we would say, hey, we remember what we were taught. We got to do something about that. That can't continue. But again, that's not. There's been a systematic conditioning of the people throughout a wide variety of ways, and the result is what we're seeing today: a general populace that has, and no offense to anybody, has been dumbed down. Generally speaking, there are people who can tell you the statistics about a particular sports team, all the statistics about that team, but they couldn't tell you spit about our government. I think it's by design. I think that they want you busy with stuff that really doesn't mean spit to you in your personal life, rather than have you be that knowledgeable in the way our government works and the way that it's supposed to work. Because if you did, you wouldn't be putting up with this insanity. I think that's one of the reasons that I got to the point where I got. This is insanity what we're living under today. It's just wrong. You'd have to be living under a rock to think that this is normal, what we're living under. It's not normal. This is not right. This is not America. This is, not the way it's supposed to be. It's the best way I can put it to you. All right, let me give Doug an opportunity. If you want to comment or question Doug, and I'll let you go. I appreciate you hanging in there with us. Thank you for calling in.
Well, I wasn't doing anything else tonight.
Oh, gee, make me feel good.
LSU
Thanks.
won today. Hey,
Gee.
all's good.
How about I just
Big party tomorrow night, baby.
How about I just cut you off now? Would that make you feel better? All right.
Well,
I wouldn't do that to you.
I wouldn't say anything about Florida State. Well, unless you whipped earlier in the year.
Well, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it, my friend.
All right. We catch you later, baby.
All right. Thank you, Doug. All right. So let me go to David. We had discussed quite a bit tonight about where the militia would step in and how the militia would behave and what the militia is. And I think I was right when I said it would be state-funded, right? So this would be something that would be provided for by the state.
Yes. Let me give me 3 or 4 minutes to give an example that illustrates how far off course we are. It's a little bit different direction, but I think you'll appreciate this. I know you will, because the very first show you did was the Saturday after 9/11, and you took the half hour talking about that whole story, and the whole point of it is that we've been lied to.
Big time.
And it just so happens
over and over.
that today I got an email from the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, which is probably the best group trying to expose what's going on anywhere in the country. And it's made up of attorneys who are really trying to do something. And I think this illustrates how bad our problem is, because this was an email that I received, which they sent out to their constituency asking for funds, okay? And it says this: Dear David, the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry is working hard to reopen 9/11 investigations. In addition to a New York City grand jury, we would like to have grand juries concerning the alleged crash of United Flight 93 near Shanksville, the alleged crash of American Flight 77 into the Pentagon, and a grand jury convened concerning the obstruction and failures of government to prevent the 9/11 crimes. On September 6, 2019, the Lawyers Committee sued the United States Attorney William Barr and Jeffrey Berman, United States Attorney, Southern District of Manhattan in New York City, to have them comply with the federal statute which requires United States Attorney Bierman to present to a federal grand jury evidence of controlled demolition of the World Trade Center towers given to him by the Lawyers Committee. Berman had previously informed the Lawyers Committee that he would comply with the law regarding presentation of evidence to a grand jury. On March 25, 2019, the Lawyers Committee sued the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington, D.C., on a mandamus action containing 7 counts for not assessing and reporting to Congress, as mandated by Congress, evidence not previously considered by the original 9/11 Commission. In addition, the Lawyers Committee is involved with litigating 3 federal Freedom of Information actions and an open public records action in New Jersey. To properly investigate crimes almost 20 years old, the Lawyers Committee needs to hire and work with professional investigators and to conduct needed outreach. These are important investigations which cost a considerable amount of money that needs to be done and which our government failed to do. The evidence of 9/11 crimes not considered by the government's official story must be gathered and presented to a grand jury in order for truth and justice to prevail. If not now, then when? Your support is most needed and appreciated. It's a 501c3. So I get this letter. But there's a point here. The reason that this organization even has to exist is because we don't have what we should have.
Exactly.
We don't have the committee. We don't have the militia, and we don't have the grand juries functioning the way the Constitution requires they function, because we don't have the ability to enforce that they would function the way they're supposed to function. So this is an example of how we now have to jump through incredible hoops. By the way, if the grand juries were in place, they would be doing the investigation. And they would have the funding by the government to do it. This organization wouldn't be having to beg people to give money to do what ought to be being done as a natural part of our society.
Yep. Look at how much they spent on trying to overthrow this existing president. Was it the last count was over $40 million. And clearly they have gone above and beyond the envelope of authority that they have in an effort to do this. This is not the kind of government that was intended to be left for us, you guys.
But Riscalla, the thing that we need to understand is the only reason that they're talking about the New York City grand jury is because of subsidiarity. That's where the events happened.
Yeah.
If it had happened in Shreveport, Louisiana, they would be petitioning the Shreveport grand jury.
Right.
You see, and by the way, this whole ruse now requires that you have to have a federal attorney or a county attorney bring the request to the grand jury. That used to not be the way it was. Any citizen could bring it to a grand jury. The evidence, the grand jury could go just look for it, but we are so dumbed down that we now have a system where the fox is guarding the hen house.
Yeah.
So this whole thing is a mess. The whole thing is all completely convoluted. In the Constitution, in the Fifth Amendment, it talks about two different tools that are used by grand juries. One is indictments. The other is presentments. But we don't do presentments anymore because the Bar Association figured out how to eliminate them. Presentments is when a grand jury just does its own work with no attorneys being involved at all. They just go and investigate. They do their own research. They call their own witnesses, and there's no attorneys involved. But that's been eliminated because of another control fraud put in place to keep the people from being in charge. This is what it's all about. How do they make it so we are not in charge anymore? We are not the government of the people anymore.
Amen. And that's, to me, that stood out like a sore thumb. And that's something that needed attention. And I didn't know what attention. How do I do it? I'm just one guy. And when I realized that it was wrong and I presented it to other people, I said, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but what can we do? Well, now this is something that we can do. Something that you carefully think about, consider the benefits and the consequences, because there's going to be consequences of making a decision like this, and then consider the benefits. To me, overall, the benefits are going to outweigh the consequences. If we could get enough of the states to follow this pattern, we would once again restore the balance that's supposed to be in the power of this great country. And a lot of this stuff that we're talking about today would no longer exist. They just would not be permitted anymore. The idea that we have, this is, again, we talk about deception. We have legislation in place called the Patriot Act. And on the surface, it sounds Patriot Act. Oh, it's going to help everybody. It's Patriot Act. That one piece of legislation took more of our God-given rights away from us than any one other single piece prior to it. And then after that, we have another piece that's called the National Defense Authorization Act. Again, put in words that makes it sound like it's to the benefit of this country and you as a citizen, blah, blah, blah. It's more ways for them to intrude into our lives. It's more ways for them to literally take away rights from us. You can be held without due process. What am I trying to say? With no time limit. I can't think of the right word. under this act. That's not America.
You mean without the
Indefinite.
opportunity to
That's what,
employ habeas corpus?
Yeah, and indefinite detention. You can be indefinitely detained under this act. That's not. That's we're talking about America. We're not talking about, Germany, China. You mean you can hold somebody here without due process, without representation, indefinitely under this act? If you consider them I think it's a domestic terrorist or domestic enemy, out of some enemy of the state or something. Yeah, you can. They haven't told the people that back around the time when the Boston charade, the Boston Marathon bombings, all that nonsense. When all that occurred, they haven't told the people openly that I'm aware of. Right around that time, they declared that the United States is now a battle zone. And as a battle zone, they can bring in the military. That the acts that kept the military out are no longer in play because now we're in the middle of a battle zone. Well, my question is, if they've declared the contiguous United States a battle zone, who's the enemy? You and me. That's what I've concluded. You and me are the enemy. Because when we went to Iran, when we went to Iraq, who was the enemy? The Iraqis were the enemy. When we went to Afghanistan, the people who lived in Afghanistan were considered. When we declared them a battlefield, they were the enemy, right? Libyans were the enemy. Well, here we are in America, and they've declared America a battleground. Guess what? This is not the kind of government that was intended for us, you guys. I'm telling you. And there is a way to rectify this situation. There's a way to restore this wrongdoing, this deceptive wrongdoing that occurred. And that's what we've been talking about. I would like to have heard from a lot more of you, according to the numbers that I get. We got, a lot of people listening, but few people interacting. And so I'm not sure if this is a subject that is not of interest to you guys, or if it's a subject that, well, yeah, okay, and that's all fine and dandy, and just you want to kick the tires, but you don't want to really take the commitment and sign the contract to purchase the vehicle, kind of thing. David brings up a good point, and I'm kind of along the same line. We're not here to kind of kick the tires. I can understand that in the beginning, learning about it. We're all learning about it. But we're looking for people that are going to be committed to this. We want to bring about a positive change. And I see this as a possible, viable way of doing that. Now, if you guys listeners are not interested in that, then we'll just move on to other subjects. But to me, this is one of the most, unquestionably, the most important subject that we have discussed on this show, and that really is the reason why I've done so many of them. 9 shows we've done on this, talking about this from the beginning until tonight. And I just got to be honest with you guys out there. I'm disappointed that we didn't get more calls. I appreciate Doug calling in. Thank you. But I really expected to get more of you to call in and get some feedback. Are we spinning our wheels? Are we spitting in the wind? Or are we really talking about something that is of interest to you, that you want to hear more about? Do you want to get involved? That kind of thing. So hopefully I'll hear from some of you. You can always leave a comment at the Red Pill Reality Show on Facebook. We'll have the archives up tomorrow. Typically by noon they're up, God willing. And you can listen to anything that you may have missed there. We'll have to consider whether this is something that we want to continue doing or not, or move on to another subject, because I didn't really. I'm kind of disappointed with the feedback I got tonight. Very, very little feedback, and it was. Again, it's one of those things. I'm like David. I don't want to sit here and harp on this and spin my wheels if nobody's really going to give a hoot. And I think that's part of the problem of the country today. We've been sedated, if you will, to not give a hoot. We don't just sit on the sideline and let somebody else worry about it.
Riscalla, maybe this is a barometer of where we are at as a society today.
Yeah.
That most people are just too overwhelmed, too busy, too distracted. They don't really feel anymore. Maybe it's that they've burned out. You know.
Yeah, I feel like that. I got to be honest with you. I feel like that sometimes. Like I'm just burned out. I just don't want to do it anymore. It seems like I'm spitting into the wind. You know, sometimes.
We're in the seventh phase of Empire, the last phase, and one of the things that happens in the last phase is you get ambivalent and apathetic, and that might be what's going on here. But people need to be wakened out of a doldrum if they really want to have a chance for survival. They're going to have to shake it off and decide, hey, this is important enough to do something, and we really need to encourage people to, think about whether you need to step out of your comfort zone and say, yeah, this is something that I really think we need to address and get involved. It's, one way or the other.
Well, guys, I'm just going to say there are people out there that are pissed off, and rightly so.
Yeah.
I see them. I talk to them all the time. I see them all the time. How much effort do they spend whining? How much effort do they spend idly and bitching in futility, basically? I'm sorry to be so crude with my language, but that's what it is. And there's a solution. I mean, I'm not saying that our solution is the whole solution. I'm not saying there's no other pieces to this puzzle. I'm not saying no one else could contribute something of great value. I didn't know that. I didn't know what David brought until I met David. But I do know this. What we offer, and especially now with David's contributions to the bigger picture, it is at least a significant part of the solution.
A step in the right direction.
Amen.
If people would take half the energy that they spend whining about this de facto system and put it towards actually fixing it, as David said earlier, restoration of what existed in the past, restoration of the proper lawful paradigm of government in this country. If they would take half of the energy that they put towards their idle whining and put it towards something that would actually make a real world difference, we could have this. We could have our country back. We could have our Constitution. And I'm not trying to cast stones or lambaste people for not calling in. I don't even know how many people were listening tonight, but I will say it's going to take more than just a few of us sitting here talking to each other in, like I said earlier, basically in this echo chamber. It's going to take the involvement of people outside of our little core group of folks. We've got to have the interest and the involvement and the support of a wider population of people.
I agree.
For all the listeners out there, whoever you might be, we need you, and we need you to step up. And I don't know how else to say it.
I think it's pretty
At least let us know that you hear and you want to be a part of the solution rather than just part of the problem.
Yeah.
Respond somehow, and let us know that you're there.
There is no neutral. There's no neutral in this thing. Either you're going to stand up for what is right, or if you think that you're sitting on the sideline, you're actually helping continue the process of this deception and this injustice that is going on to each one of us. So there is
the dissolution that's happening, the dissolving of a good society.
I like to say you're either part of the solution or you're part of the pollution. There's no in between. And so that's really what it boils down to. Either you're going to help with this situation, you're going to stand for what is right, you make a look at the information that is presented, come to your own conclusion, and I believe most people, after seeing what is presented, they will see that what is happening is not right, and we should, by all means, we should rectify it. We should return it to the way that it's supposed to be, because if it were, much of what is happening to us today would not be occurring. They would not have the power to do it. See, right now, they don't have the authority to do it, but they have the power to do it. And that's where we have failed miserably in the system. They have overpowered the citizenry of this country. And once that happens, you're no longer free. You're subject to whatever they want to push down your throat, whether that is a forced vaccine, whether that is forced fluoridation of the water, whether that is forced genetically modified organisms, whether that is forced spraying of the skies of God knows what they're spraying on you. It doesn't make any difference. You can't outgun them, then they're no longer afraid of you. Once that happens, you're in a world of poop. That's really what it boils down to. And that's where we're at.
What about
today.
forced confiscation of wealth?
Yeah.
It really is a matter of lives and livelihoods are on the line, and not just a few people. It affects all of us. I mean, you mentioned the Bundys earlier.
Yeah.
And Mr. Finicum, a good man,
Yeah.
was
Murdered. Openly
on
murdered.
national TV.
Yeah.
Just shot.
Yep.
And, I mean, I know that was a contentious situation, but that man didn't deserve to die, and he's not the only one. I'm not even
There's
talking
many.
about the Ruby Ridge and the Wacos. I'm just talking about there are so many people that
We are out of time, my friends. We're all out of time. I thank you guys for calling in, and we'll see if we can do this again. Let me see what kind of feedback we get. Thank you to listeners. We are completely out of time. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland.